Chapter 1764. In the dusty underground palace, the heavy aura of time settled in every corner. Every brick, stone, and layout in this place had a heavy aura of history, but it was impossible to tell which place they belonged to. Whether it was legends or myths, it was difficult to connect them to the scene in front of them. They could not even calculate how long this place had existed. It was as if this place had been created out of thin air and had the attribute of ancient history. Its characteristic was that it was ancient. Other than that, they could not see anything else. The huge square in the underground palace was nearly 3,000 feet long and wide. It was like a chessboard that had been set up. There were thousands of stone pillars on the huge chessboard. When they walked into the chessboard, they felt as if they were in a forest of stone pillars. The stone pillars beside them were warriors in full armor. There were spearmen, crossbowmen, and cavalrymen. It was as if they were in an ancient battlefield and had returned to the scene where cold weapons clashed against their faces. It was such an imposing manner, but they could not feel the blood and cruelty of the battlefield at all. The group shuttled through the forest of stone pillars and kept looking around. Only a few of the thousands of stone pillars had the same shape. They studied them for a long time and even clearly looked at the carvings on the ground, but they could not tell what they were. They could not tell at all. The clean lines were clearly deliberately drawn. If they looked down at the entire ground from above, they might be able to see a clear and complete picture, just like the Nazca painting. But at this moment, they were walking on the ground. No matter how they tried to figure it out, they could only see the corners, and most of their vision was blocked by the stone pillars. "Hey!" Lu Wuxing suddenly shouted. His hands were wrapped around a relatively slender stone pillar. He clenched his teeth and used all his strength. Even his face was red from holding it in, but he still couldn't move the stone pillar a centimeter away. He put down his hands and lifted his leg to kick it fiercely. A few seconds later, Lu Wuxing squatted on the ground and hugged his right leg with a pained expression. Everyone could not help but look at him. This is the child of the Lu family. One of them has all points and strength, but his brain is not working well. The other is smart, but his strength is balanced out. But even a powerful person who has reached Earth realm culmination cannot move a stone. These stone pillars looked like they were made of stone, but they were obviously not made of stone. Their hardness and quality were far beyond what could be made with ordinary means. Even with the current level of technology, it was estimated that it would be difficult to make stones of such quality. "I can't do it anymore. Uncle Lu, let's go take a look at the door first." After walking around the forest of stone pillars for a long time, he shrugged and said to Lu Weiran, "Didn't I tell you long ago?" Lu Weiran shook her head grumpily. "No matter how many times I look at this thing, it's strange. I can't find any similarities at all. It doesn't look like a Huaxia myth, nor does it look like a Western myth. It can't be a myth from ancient times. If that's really the case, then it'll be terrible. That's a period of time that can't be cleared and investigated." Everyone was also helpless. There were hundreds of people, and basically all of them were famous figures in the cultivation world. Each of them had their own knowledge. These hundreds of people had recorded at least 60 to 70% of the world's information. If they were to go back 3,000 to 4,000 years, there would be things that they could talk about. They didn't expect that as soon as they came in, they would fall into this strange place. An obvious gap could be seen in the middle of the heavy solid door. The two stone doors of unknown weight were tightly closed. Just standing under the door, one could feel an unusually heavy aura. If these two doors were to be smashed down, no one present would be able to get up again. Even the experts of the Four Seas realm would be punished. The young man in blue walked forward and pressed his hands on the stone door with force. He held in his throat and breathed out. Everyone watched him for a long time, but he didn't even let out a fart. They couldn't help but look away. Today's little firecracker had failed. "I can't push it open." The young man in blue grimaced and reached out to knock on the door again. He turned to look at Lu Weiran. "Uncle Lu, you've already seen it once. Is there anything special about this door? You can't have gathered so many people here without any reason, right? There are traces of dowel marks on the door, but they're a bit shallow. I don't know if it's because it has been washed away for too long." Lu Weiran stepped forward and patted the solid door. She tilted her head and said to the young man in blue, "It should be impossible to open the door directly. I guess it should be related to the dowel marks on the door. You can also take a look at the door." The last sentence was said to everyone. The group of people listened and became a little more spirited. When they came in, they were either running or walking. Now that they finally had something to do, they hurriedly stepped forward and used their methods on the two impenetrable doors. Among the hundreds of people who came, half of them were proficient in magic tools and dowel marks, and the other half were proficient in martial arts. Very few of them took care of both aspects. Therefore, only half of the people walked to the door. The other half was responsible for watching the show. When necessary, they could even be a cheerleader. Yin Nuashing and Hui stood about 10 feet away from the door and looked up at the two heavy stone doors. Zhou Zibai saw that they were indifferent and couldn't help but whisper, "Aren't we going to take a look?" "I'm looking." "Don't worry, we can see everything at a glance from this distance." Yin Nuashing responded softly. "Stone door, stone door." Ah, it was just an ordinary stone door. It didn't seem to have too many magical features. He tried his best to find some very magical and special features, but he had looked back and forth at the two stone doors many times. He couldn't see anything. As for dowel marks, there were indeed signs of dowel marks, but they were very rare. Moreover, they weren't left behind after being washed away by time like Lu Weiran said. They seemed to only have a little bit of dowel marks. As for their function, well, it was just an access control. There should be other ways to open the stone door. Just by touching the access control, no one could get in without taking out the key. The space behind the door is tightly covered. Hui said to Feng in the soul. His black eyes flickered with some golden light. There's no way to spy on it. For the power that has been sealed at this time, it's impossible to spy on it? Yes, it seems that you need to use a little strength to see the situation behind it. You don't need to release your power. You just need to use a little method. The movement can't be suppressed. Hui nodded. "Do you see anything?" Yin Nuashing's gaze swept across the stone door and landed on the smooth stone ground behind it. She stared at the stone pillars. Sure enough, it still related to these things. In the area where the stone pillars were placed, the stone ground seemed to be inlaid on the ground as a whole. It was relatively smooth. The other places were paved with cut stone bricks, which was deliberate and conspicuous enough. However, according to Lu Weiran and the others, the existence of these stone pillars might be related to legends, myths, and the like. Then this was troublesome. How long had they been on this star? How could they know the history that had been covered by time? They were really forcefully making things difficult for them. Hui looked for a while and gradually didn't want to use his brain. He showed signs of losing his patience and began to sway his body from side to side. From time to time, he would circle around the nearest stone pillar. Then he stood on the stone pillar and looked around. He raised his head and looked up. Suddenly, he clapped his hands and jumped down to Feng's side. "Feng, how about I send you up to overlook this ground?" Yin Nuashing was stunned. The cultivators in this world didn't seem to be able to fly in the air without special methods. If they wanted to be omnipotent, it seemed that they had to be in the heavenly realm, close to the level of mortal immortals. They didn't want to make too much of a fuss, so they had been following the rules. After all, there were outsiders here. There was no need to be too shocking. Anyway, it's just for show. After you fly up, just stick to the ceiling and pretend to stand with your strength. It's 300 to 400 meters high. It shouldn't be surprising to throw a person up. Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes but nodded. Hui grinned when he saw this. Without saying a word, he grabbed Yin Nuashing's collar and threw him up with all his strength. Yin Nuashing shot into the sky like an arrow. The blue-clothed young man, who was a little bored because there was no progress in solving the puzzle, began to wander around. He happened to turn his head and saw this scene. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Oh, you can do that. It's like a Nazca landscape painting. Of course, you have to look at it from above." Everyone turned their heads when they heard the exclamation. They happened to see Yin Nuashing rushing to the ceiling and standing on top of it against gravity. He hung upside down like a bat and looked down at the entire underground palace. They could not help but exclaim in admiration. They really did not think that there was such a method. Subconsciously, they thought of getting someone to get a drone in to take aerial photos or something. Then their thoughts were stuck. It would still take some time to get out of this place. Hanging upside down from the ceiling and overlooking the entire underground palace floor, Yin Nuoxing's gaze was slightly startled. Looking from this angle, whether it was the stone pillars or the ground beneath his feet, they all looked different. The stone pillars from top to bottom integrated into a pattern, and each stone pillar was an independent pattern. Even if there were many repeated patterns, when looking down, one could still see some traces that were not the same. But these round, flat circles, stone lumps, what does this pattern mean? Yin Nuoxing muttered to herself and couldn't help but frown. Little Angel also helped to observe from his perspective. At this time, he really wanted to directly mobilize a large amount of rule force to forcefully solve all the mysteries here. In a short while, he would probably know what existed here or what would happen here. At this time, the blue-clothed young man suddenly clapped his hands, looked up and shouted, "Little sister, take a picture with your mobile phone and let us see." Yin Nuoxing and Huey's face stiffened. Damn it, there was no such thing. He hurriedly borrowed a mobile phone from Zhou Zibai and threw it to Yin Nuoxing through Huey's throw. He fumbled for a while to understand this rectangular brick. After taking a few pictures, he released his bat form and landed from above. He put the picture overlooking the panoramic view in front of everyone. I still don't understand it at all. The blue-clothed young man came up to take a look and smiled bitterly. He scratched his head hard and said, "Uncle Lu, come over and take a look." Lu Weiren came up to take a look and turned to look at the two old men. Take a look? The two masters of the Four Seas realm took the picture of the mobile phone and fiddled with it for a long time, zooming in and out. Their old eyes reflected the bright pattern on the screen. Their brows, which didn't have many eyebrows left, frowned from time to time and then slowly relaxed. After a long time, they let out a long sigh. It looks a bit like some ancient array. Oh, array? It doesn't look like it. The other old man of the Four Seas realm shook his head and pointed at the screen. Look at this part and this part inside. Ignore this part of the pattern and just look at some of these and these. There were many patterns engraved on the ground. Many patterns and chaotic lines were piled up together in one place. It looked very messy. Moreover, the lines and patterns were all put together with the same color. It was impossible to distinguish which part was which. It was like thousands of people writing their names on a huge white paper. It would also become very messy if one looked at it from a high altitude. It looked like a hole from horizontal and vertical. Moreover, it was guaranteed that one wouldn't be able to find where one's name was written after leaving, as long as it was chaotic enough. The place that the old man pointed out was an area near the center of a big circle and a small circle. He also pointed out the mysterious patterns around it. There were 3 or 4 circles. 2 of them were the inner and outer boundaries, and the other 2 were used to surround the patterns that he pointed out. It happened to be in the middle of the 2 circles. Doesn't it look like a compass? You might as well say that it's a compass. Compasses are things that only appeared in modern times. This is something left behind by ancient experts. Why can't it be a compass? The predecessor of a compass was called a compass in ancient times. It's hard to say which of these 2 things came first. Besides, a compass has more than 1 or 2 circles. Anyway, that's what it means. I can't say the specifics. I just said that it looks like it. I think it looks like a star map, but it doesn't match up. Look, these patterns don't look like constellations, and they don't look like the stars or galaxies that have been observed. We're not experts in this area. Should we ask the people at the observatory to help us take a look? Everyone couldn't help but smiled bitterly as they listened to the conversation between the 2. They didn't even know where to solve the riddle. Compass, star map, and so on. It would be great if these lines could light up. When it came to star maps, Yin Nuoxing reluctantly looked a little spirited. When everyone finished looking around and took out a photo to ponder, he also took Zhou Zibai's phone and stared at the photo in a daze. For the time being, when he came to this world, he looked at the starry sky once or twice. Unfortunately, the photo in front of him didn't seem to match the stars that existed in the starry sky. If this scribbled ground was related to the stone door, he didn't feel any traces of energy. He couldn't find any traces of the two connecting and influencing each other, even if he scanned it with energy. The pattern itself doesn't have any energy movement. There isn't even any residual energy. Even the bottom is a solid stone lump. The only thing worth paying attention to is the pattern on the surface, Hui said in a low voice. Hui said in a low voice, but there are also some formations. As long as they are in place, they can be activated correctly. The energy will only appear at that time. Yin Nuoxing handed the phone over. Then do you understand anything? No. Hui smiled bitterly and scratched his head. How can we figure out things related to this world so quickly? We can't use methods that are beyond common sense now. Otherwise, we can carefully use the power of the rules to touch it. This kind of thing can't be analyzed with a little power of the rules. I've seen it. Yin Nuoxing let out a long breath. Unless we grab the heart of the world or use a slightly larger power of the rules. But then, I know, these things must be related to the starry sky. The sudden shout interrupted the sole communication between Yin Nuoxing and Hui. Everyone was shocked and looked away from the phone to look at the young man in blue who suddenly shouted loudly. He put his left hand on his waist and pointed to the sky with his right hand. These are either stars or galaxies. In short, there are things in the starry sky, but he shouted and pointed to the ground. It's the starry sky that was observed thousands of years ago, and the location is unknown. This secret realm may not be able to directly observe the starry sky. Look at the island outside and see where it was thousands of years ago. This is indeed a clue. Lu Weiran nodded and looked at him suspiciously. But how can you be sure that this must be related to the starry sky? I'm just guessing. The young man in blue smiled and scratched his head. He couldn't help but look around. Didn't the ancients like to observe the stars at night? Look at the pyramids or something. Everyone. Just guessing? Lu Weiran rolled her eyes when she heard this. This kid was bluffing, but there was no need to get to the bottom of this. This kid had his own way of understanding things and was also very mysterious. Starry sky. Speaking of starry sky, Zhou Zhibai suddenly reacted and looked at Yin Nuoxing and the others. She lowered her voice and said, Mr. Feng, you came back from Little girl, when it comes to stargazing, the things you see are different depending on the location. Hui grinned and explained, although it's under the same starry sky, the starry sky observed in another place is completely different, even if the stars are the same. Okay. Zhou Zhibai smiled bitterly. This was true, but she had never been to the starry sky, so it was difficult for her to associate it with this aspect. After Hui finished speaking, he poked Feng's arm and said in the soul, How is it? What's the result of the reverse deduction? Yin Nuoxing's closed eyes opened slightly, and a ray of colorful light quietly released. Then she closed her eyes again. After a while, she responded in the soul transmission. The time of reverse deduction has been shifted to 10,000 years ago. Compared with the current starry sky, the coincidence rate is less than 10%. Excluding the big shuffle of the stars in the starry sky, it's almost certain that it's not. Yin Nuo opened his eyes and responded. The lifespan of the stars was very long. The lifespan of a mortal was only an instant compared to the lifespan of a star. If what was recorded here was really an ancient star, even if part of the starlight had dissipated billions of years ago, and the last ray of light had been observed by the people of the ancient era a few thousand years ago, to the present, it would only be one or a few stars missing. However, there were not many stars that could match up at all. What if we changed the position? Moving within 1,000 light years, we can't find a similar image. Even if we include the thousands of years, the distance of this star system and the starry sky is not far, and the same goes for other stars. Not to mention that I'm directly observing from the star system. Yin Nuoxing continued to shake her head. When they finished, Lu Weiran also picked up a phone call. Her expression changed several times in a short conversation. She sighed and shook her head at everyone. The observatory said that they can't find the corresponding image. It's impossible to find it in a short time. The young man in blue suddenly came forward. Uncle Lu, is there a signal in this place? It's a magical instrument specially made by the Alliance. It's the same as a mobile phone, but it has some other communication functions. It uses the server outside as the center to communicate. Although there's no signal, this arcane realm doesn't cut off the connection of spiritual energy. Lu Weiran shook the magical instrument in her hand, then shook her head. Well, kid, your guess seems to be wrong. Let's start from another place. The young man in blue heard this and grinned hard. No, this is for sure, definitely, 1110,000%. Something in the starry sky, but we can't compare it in a short time. Lu Weiran sighed. With the current level of technology, comparing star maps requires a fixed location. But this time, it involves time, and there may be a difference in location. Although the changes in the starry sky for thousands of years are not very obvious, the changes in the land under our feet are already very drastic. Let the observatory be busy for a while. Let's think about it here. Maybe it has nothing to do with the starry sky. Everyone couldn't help but sigh when they heard this. They were a little distressed. It was rare for them to come here, but they were blocked in front of the door. Now, they had to observe the stars at night. Yin Nuoxing yawned and tilted her head to look at Hui. It was rare for him to be willing to use his brain, and he was still swiping at the photo. His eyes were so focused and serious that Yin Nuoxing didn't want to disturb him. She simply stood by the side and let her senses spread out, directly observing the entire underground palace. Putting aside the topic of the compass star map and the starry sky, everyone threw the topic to other places to study. All kinds of methods were tested one after another. Whether it was hypotheses or legends, they tested and came up with ideas. Some studied the stone door, and some studied the huge pattern underground. But without exception, all of them hit the south wall hard and had to turn back. About 4 to 5 hours had passed, and they were a little discouraged and dispirited. What kind of broken place is this? What the hell is this place? Uncle Lu, you really know how to make things difficult for people. How can you drag us to such a strange place? The blue-clothed young man slumped on the ground, leaning against the wall and rolling his eyes. Lu Weiran was a little depressed when she heard this. How would I know it would be so difficult? On the way here, we only encountered some simple artifacts and solved them casually. Isn't it because we saw the traces of Tao on the door and felt that it was related to the artifacts? That's why we used this conference to find some people to explore the secret realm together. Headache. The blue-clothed young man patted his head in distress and looked around. Everyone was sitting on the ground to rest, somewhat dispirited. He glanced around and saw that the people from his Zhou family were also resting. No, the young lady and the other young lady who came with the Zhou family were still standing there. There was no movement for a few hours. One was staring at the stone door, the other was in a daze, and the other was looking at his phone. Zhou Zhibai's phone reminded her that it had run out of battery not long ago, and now she was using Uncle Lu's phone. Young lady, did you see anything? The blue-clothed young man couldn't help but shout. Everyone turned their eyes and looked at him. They didn't even have the strength to laugh at him at this moment. Yin Nuoxing raised her hand and waved gently. She said in her soul, "Then, Lord Guardian who rarely uses his brain, have you seen anything in these 4 or 5 hours?" Oh! Hui heard the voice and came back to his senses. He raised his head and stared at Yin Nuoxing with a serious face. "Phone, I think that kid might be right." Starry sky? Yin Nuoxing crossed her arms and didn't rush to deny it. She raised her chin and motioned for him to continue. A ray of golden light flashed in Huey's eyes. Yes, this should be a starry sky, but it might be depicting another starry sky. If I'm not wrong, Yin Nuoxing was startled. That's interesting. A secret realm located on this planet with life. The mystery left in front of the door, the clue itself pointed to another starry sky. The level of this problem suddenly sublimated and rose to the level of the void. As everyone knew, the void liked to joke. Where would the joke point to this time? Chapter 1765. Life forms were easily influenced by conditions, especially environmental conditions. For example, they came here from the distant 8 elements realm. Since they had nothing to do, they subconsciously thought that since it was something from this place, it must have something to do with this place, right? It was impossible for them to think that it was something from another world. Moreover, this was the 3 elements realm where 99% of the living beings didn't know what the void was. It was even more impossible for them to think that it was something from another world at once, right? Furthermore, this was the three elements realm, where 99% of the living beings didn't know what the void was. Even the things they saw in the realm of the gods were basically things from the realm of the gods, unless some half-dead alien suddenly decided to bury himself in the realm of the gods and left something behind. However, in that place, crossing the void and the void was too common. It was not hard to imagine. Then their cognition was restricted. That's right, whether it was Maple or him, they were all suppressed here. If he had not thought of something, they would probably be here staring at this photo for the whole night. Even the heavens did not know that this thing was from another world. After all, it could only manage its own territory. It could not manage other people's things. So, Yin Nuashing took the phone from Huey's hand and looked back and forth for a while. Then, she looked up and said, "How do you know that this is from another world? Where did you get the information? Or is it just intuition?" Hui grinned and suddenly pointed at a pattern on the photo. The pattern looked like a mountain. The top part of the mountain and the bottom part of the mountain were both buried in the ground. The mountain was also wrapped in a circle. "Look at this." Yin Nuashing glanced at it and looked up at him. "Don't tell me that this is the realm of the gods." How do you know?" Hui was about to say something and was stunned when Yin Nuashing said it first. "It's really?" Yin Nuashing was stunned for a few seconds. Speechless, she placed her hand on her forehead and said, "I was just guessing. After all, you must have come from another galaxy so quickly. You could only recognize some symbol from here. Plus, you pointed it out to me so cheekily. The only thing I can think of is, how did you know that this symbol is from the realm of the gods?" Hui smiled a few times and slowly said, "Feng, that's the universal pattern that other worlds made for the first great world of the eight elements realm. We, the people of the divine realm, have our own logo, but it's only limited to the people of the divine realm. The recognition of our family must be based on their starting point. This is the pattern used to identify the people of the divine realm. I've also traveled in the order void. No matter what, they were all living beings who had traveled through tens of millions of worlds. Maple might be a bit less, but he had only traveled with them during the initial period of their expedition to other places. He had traveled to many worlds, but after everything had settled down, he had basically holed himself up in the God realm. He had truly traveled to many places, so he naturally knew about these things. But even if that's not the reason, you've actually seen this pattern before." Hui raised his hand and poked at the pattern. "This pattern was already there when we went on an expedition to other worlds. Feng, you were just too lazy to remember it." "Oh, that's a common occurrence." Yin Nuashing glanced at him indifferently, then lowered her head to look at her phone. After a long silence, she slowly said, "That means this is a part of the galaxy that belongs to the eight elements realm. Considering the time in this world, it's something that happened recently? In terms of the timeline, it should be so." Hui nodded. "There are many other planets with life under the same galaxy as the realm of the gods. Basking in the light of the realm of the gods, the level of life has reached a rather high level. This huge star map might be in that galaxy. It's located outside of the realm of the gods. Looking at the galaxy, it can include the realm of the gods itself." Hui finished speaking and stroked his chin. "But this is just a direction. I'm actually quite worried that this is actually a manifestation of the void. Just try it one by one." Yin Nuashing threw her phone to Hui and turned to look at the forest of stone pillars. She could not help but frown. "Hui, if that's the case, actually, the problem is a bit serious. Don't you think?" Hui was still looking down at the picture. After a while, he came back to his senses and his expression stiffened. "All right. A map of the eight elements realm's galaxy has appeared in the realm of the three elements. This matter itself is a bit serious. It's that, right? It's really that void joke. The people of the three elements realm went directly to the realm of the eight elements. And not just that. Looking at the situation, it went there for some reason and turned back. In the end, it left all its belongings here. Did it die? God knows. Even the heavens don't know." Yin Nuashing looked around and sighed softly, shaking her head. Anyway, I'll first compare it with the galaxy where the realm of the gods is. As long as it's indeed in the galaxy where the realm of the gods is, and it just so happens that the realm of the gods is included in the observation, then I'll have a general direction. Using the power of the realm of the gods across 4 primordial realms, we could not help but laugh dryly when he saw the faint light overflowing from his body. After a moment of careful observation, he found that it was just using the perspective left in the realm of the gods. It was not transferring power across the primordial realms. There was nothing unusual about that. To the realm of the gods, they were equivalent to half a clone. When necessary, they could indeed switch their perspective to the realm of the gods. No matter how far away it was, as long as the realm of the gods was not blocked by the void, there would be no problem. We saw that Feng had entered a state of concentration, so he simply relaxed a little in place. After jumping for a while, Feng suddenly came back to his senses and stared at him with a rather strange gaze. Hui was startled and couldn't help but swallow his saliva. "Why is your expression so serious? Is there a problem?" Yin Nuoxing lowered her head to look at the photo and said slowly, "For the time being, we've found the location. Using the realm of the gods' memories of a world where it once existed as a standard search, we found a position that matches 100% through external observation. This proves that there is indeed such a living star in the world where the realm of the gods once existed. The person who left this should have also recorded the scene that he saw at that time." The slightly vague statement obviously seemed to be deliberately hiding something. Hui, who had countless years of tacit understanding with her, could not help but look serious. "Then, what's the factor that you're not sure about?" "Time." Yin Nuoxing's beautiful eyes met his. She narrowed her eyes slightly and said lightly, "Making everything move against time, making the star go to the correct position, tracing back to the point in time where it once existed, the final position where time was fixed." Yin Nuoxing looked at Hui and said slowly, "The beginning of the 47th era." Hui and the little girl, who had been holding back for a while, were stunned. The beginning of the 47th era, in the light cluster of the same world as the realm of the gods, in a place half a starry sky away, an observation spot that matches 100% was found. The 47th era? Huey's eyes widened in the next moment. He said with horror, "It's already the 56th era now. A total of 9 eras. In terms of the lifespan of the lower primordial realm, this is already countless times of destruction and rebirth. The history of this world is only slightly more than 10 billion years. How is it possible?" The light cluster of the world where the realm of the gods was located was affected by the realm of the gods itself. Its lifespan was greatly extended in all aspects, including all the stars in it. Even though it had existed for more than 10 eras, it had not lost its vitality. Until now, it could still be seen that stars were constantly being born and destroyed. Some special stars had even burned for more than 10 eras. But that was the 8 primordial realms, and it was only special because it was affected by the realm of the gods. This place was the 3 primordial realms. Many conditions were. Yin Nuoxing waved his hand to calm Hui down a little. "Do you still remember that I told you about the characteristics of the abyss of myriad souls before we came here? This place has things that we can't figure out for the time being." He stroked his beautiful long hair with both hands and slowly said to himself, "But since something has happened, there will be traces left. There will be marks of karma engraved in the laws, the void, or other places. There must be. Since this has happened, no matter the reason behind it, there must be a process and a reason for it. This is an established fact. We just have to pursue the process and cause of this fact. We just have to accept everything that has happened. That's how it is." Hui smiled bitterly and scratched his long hair. "But when I think about it, it still feels a little unbelievable. There are too many things that don't make sense." Yin Nuoxing looked around and said casually, "I've asked you to do this. Can you do it?" "Ah, I can still do it. I can change the world core and adjust the strength of part or all of the laws to the extent that it can resist the void. I can guarantee that the world core itself will not be destroyed and preserve everything that once existed in this world. In this way, its birth and destruction can be exactly the same, or only the form after birth can be guaranteed to be the same. Then, I can preserve some of the more important things, such as this arcane realm. In this way, I can restore the scene that we see now, as if this world has not been destroyed after 9 years. Hui scratched his head and thought as he muttered, although there's a little trouble in the middle, but that's what I mean. But it requires a considerable amount of power to do it. Yin Nuoxing pointed up. Do you still remember those things that we saw when we came to this planet? Those heavenly, God-level marks. Ah, yes, those things have existed for a long time. I'm afraid it's really like what I said. The beginning and development of this world have been solidified for some reason. Hui smiled bitterly. He remembered that pile of heavenly God-level marks. I keep feeling that. It's a little interesting. This world seems to be hiding some secrets. But it's still the same problem. The people of the 3rd Yuan realm appeared in the 8th Yuan realm. The little girl looked up at them and said softly, the people of the 3rd Yuan realm, even the people of the divine race, have no way to break through the barrier of the Yuan realm and go to the 4th Yuan realm. However, some of the cracks and passages between the Yuan realms have a very low probability of opening. They can use this method to cross realms, and it's a one-way trip. There won't be a situation of crossing to the lower realms. That will lead to death. Ah, we know that too. When we first came here, we speculated about the situation here. Hui nodded. I even made a joke. I used up the luck of several lifetimes to come from the 3rd Yuan realm to the 8th Yuan realm. The probability is very low, but it's indeed possible. However, just the probability alone is already very difficult. Moreover, after crossing realms, they have to live in an unfamiliar place for countless years. The little girl curled her lips. The probability is tens of billions of times lower than the probability of the birth of an origin life form. So, do you think it's possible that the people of the 8th Yuan realm came here and brought people back? Yin Nuoxing's heart skipped a beat. These words reminded him of something. He remembered that in the diary that Heavenly Destruction God had written, she had once stayed in the lower primordial realm and had brought people back. It's indeed possible. Yin Nuoxing nodded and looked up at the stone door. Let's not talk about that for now. In short, the mystic realm in front of us was left behind by someone who went to the 8th Yuan realm. And for some reason, it returned here and left behind this mystic realm. Let's open the door first. You found a way? Hui quickly tilted his head. How do we open the door? I've already said so much. You still can't find a way to open the door? Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes at him and pointed at the phone in his hand. She pointed at the ground, full of stone pillars. The stars returned to their positions. Do you understand? The stars you mentioned. We pointed at the stone pillars in a daze. Don't tell me it's these stone pillars. In the scene of the starry sky that I found at that moment, apart from all the patterns on the ground, which are all the stars corresponding to the patterns, there's a considerable amount of celestial bodies that were left out. It might be these stone pillars with independent patterns. Yin Nuoxing paused for a moment, and her eyes flashed. That's what I thought at first, and I also wanted to say that. Hui smiled bitterly. You've already said what you thought. I just thought about it. Now, I want to correct you, but these stone pillars have no signs of energy at all. I think that there might be some missing information. Among these thousands of stone pillars, there is no stone pillar that represents the realm of the gods. That is to say, it's not as simple as just returning them to their original places. Yin Nuoxing lowered her head and began to rub her bangs again. She looked around from time to time and stared at the stone door for a long time. She muttered to herself, if the key itself is not wrong, then could the remaining condition be on the door? Don't tell me you want to break the door? Hui could not help but tremble when he saw her expression. It was a very dangerous expression, indicating that she would make a move in the next second. Theoretically, yes. Yin Nuoxing nodded. She turned into a shadow and rushed out, causing Hui to suck in a breath of cold air. Damn it. He was overthinking and forgot that there were many innocent passers-by here. If he just rushed over and smashed the door with a slap, wouldn't that be... Boom! Wouldn't that be... Well, he forgot to stop her. The sudden loud noise from the underground palace made everyone who was resting in the corner tremble. They all stood up with a bang and looked in the direction of the door nervously and blankly. They saw that the girl with long, colorful hair had slapped the stone door at this moment. The entire underground palace trembled for a while because of this. Gravel and stone powder kept falling from the walls and the ceiling. "What are you doing? You scare me to death. Can't you let me rest?" The young man in blue glanced at the person who was cursing and quickly took the lead to run over. He moved closer to Hui and asked, "Miss, did you think of something?" "Oh." Hui laughed dryly and replied, "It seems that I have found some clues. Now, I just need to piece the clues together." "Clues?" Everyone was stunned and looked at each other. What kind of clues would require them to break the door? The tumultuous underground palace shook for a while and slowly stopped. Yin Nuoxing landed from midair and looked up at the two stone doors that did not move. Everyone was also waiting, but there was no movement for a long time. They could not help but feel a little restless. "Where's the clue?" "What clue? Is this your clue? You just slapped the door?" Lu Wuxing could not help but sneer, playing to the gallery. "You might as well." "Shut up." Yin Nuoxing looked back and glared at him fiercely. The power of the rules in her colorful eyes made everyone who saw this scene tremble fiercely. A strange impact surged into their hearts, as if they were being strangled by the Grim Reaper, making them unable to speak. He waved his hand and pointed to the side. "If there's nothing else, go to the side." Annoying. We really want to know if he said ordinary or annoying now. He did not understand Feng's action of slamming the door. After all, he had been looking at the photo just now, and Feng had been staring at the door. The division of labor was clear. Perhaps Feng had already understood from the door. The place where he had slammed the door just now seemed to have some cracks. Oh, he seemed to understand. "Feng, you punched the door on the right too." Hui hurriedly shouted. "That's what I was thinking." Yin Nuoxing nodded and jumped into the air. She turned around and slammed her fist on the door. The entire underground palace suddenly shook again. Everyone even saw a shock wave when she punched. They did not know if it had broken through the sound barrier. After taking 2 consecutive punches from a certain killer weapon, the 2 doors finally moved no matter how abnormal they were. A series of creaking sounds came from above, and the sound became louder and louder. Just when everyone thought that the 2 doors were going to fall down together, suddenly, a piece of stone weighing a few hundred kilograms fell from above and hit the ground heavily, splashing a lot of sand and dust. Then, more pieces of stone peeled off from the stone door like raindrops. Everyone saw that the situation was not right and hurriedly stepped back. From afar, it looked like it was raining, and there was even dust on the ground. "This is the original appearance of the door?" The blue-clothed young man instantly exclaimed. The door that had been peeled off revealed its true appearance. The left door was dyed with a dark purple and a clear blue starry sky background, while the right door was a mix of orange and fiery red, reflecting 2 different starry skies. When the 2 doors revealed their original appearance, dozens of rays of light shot out from various parts of the doors and landed on the ground behind everyone, illuminating the forest of stone pillars. With the illumination of the light, everyone realized that the lines of the mysterious pattern on the ground were gradually becoming brighter. "It's going to open, it's going to open." The blue-clothed young man clenched his fists excitedly. Just when everyone held their breaths and thought that the door would slowly open with a rumble, the lines on the ground suddenly extinguished and disappeared completely. Only the 50 to 60 rays of light were left shining on the ground, but there was no more movement. What's going on?" The blue-clothed young man asked in surprise, his expression frozen in excitement. Yin Nuoxing lowered her head and rubbed her bangs, murmuring to herself, "The clue still needs to be adjusted. What a headache." Hui also squatted on the ground with a troubled expression. The clue had been directly stated, not hinted, and the words were thrown right in their faces. This was the door left for the people of the 8 elements realm to open, or for it to open itself in the future. But where did the person go? They didn't know. In the end, they didn't know what the guy left behind this secret realm for, and why he left it here. At this moment, everyone didn't say much. Lu Weiran waved her hand and asked everyone to go to the side. Yin Nuoxing was still looking up at the stone door. Hui was still comparing the stone pillars on the ground and the new rays of light. The little girl was running around, as if she knew something but couldn't grasp it. The little girl stared at the stone pillar that was close to the rays of light. After thinking for a while, she pushed the stone pillar hard and pushed it to the place where the rays of light shone. A rumbling sound shocked everyone. The stone pillar was ridiculously heavy. Even Earth Realm experts couldn't push it, but it was pushed by the little girl who didn't seem to have any sense of existence. Well, it doesn't look right. The little girl stood on the stone pillar next to them and looked at the pillar that landed in the rays of light. She shook her head. Nothing happened. Obviously, the train of thought was wrong, or the position was wrong. She turned and stared at the stone door. There are 61 rays of light. What's the meaning of 61? The little girl didn't care about anything and directly shouted at Hui. The number 61, does it have any special meaning in your world? Huh? No, what meaning can it have? Hui shook his head hard. Some of the rays of light shone on a stone pillar, and some on the ground. Just now, it looked like something was about to be activated, but suddenly it retreated. The so-called condition might have been revealed, but something was still missing. Could it really be like what Feng said, and let the stars return to their positions? Feng, let me see the star map from that time, Hui said through the soul transmission. Yin Nuoxing subconsciously threw the star map of the 47th era over. She was stunned. What are you planning to do? I have to try something. Staying here isn't a solution. Didn't you say that the stars have returned to their positions? Then I'll go and take a look. In the next hour, everyone watched Hui and the little girl move the stone pillars back and forth. The entire underground palace reverberated with rumbling and vibrating sounds. At this moment, they could only be ornaments at the side, acting as spectators. Suddenly, they felt that they were a little redundant. Phew, it's done. Let's see the results. More than an hour later, Hui used the stone pillars to replace the missing stars on the ground. Then, he turned to look at the stone door. The door didn't move at all. The rays of light were still there. Chapter 1766. In the huge underground palace, the heavy stone pillars repeatedly smashed into the ground as Hui continued to move. Yin Nuoxing was numb and a little dazed. She did not understand what was going on. The young man in blue, who was standing by the side, could not help but walk to her side. He wanted to say something, but his eyes were full of confusion. When he saw the same confusion in the young man's eyes, he did not say anything. After moving the stone pillars back and forth, another long 2 hours had passed. It had been more than 10 hours since they arrived at this broken door. Everyone was a little impatient with this stubborn stone, a star-shaped door. However, other than the 3 people who tried to open it and seemed to know something, the others were in a state of confusion. At this moment, they could only wait patiently. After waiting for another half an hour, the young man in blue could not hold it in anymore. He quickly looked at Yin Nuoxing and muttered, "Miss, do you know something?" Yin Nuoxing glanced at him and turned to look at Hui. At this moment, the latter was squatting on the ground and pulling his hair in distress. He did not move for a long time. She did not know if he was tired from moving the things or was thinking about something. "I don't know." Yin Nuoxing shook her head in response. Hui might know something, but he did not know. If he knew something, it was definitely not something important. How important could it be if he could not remember it at this time? It had been half a day, but they were still stuck in front of the door. Yin Nuoxing seemed to hear a faint sound from someone's stomach. She had not heard this sound for a long time. Except for the 3 of them, the rest of the people present were not completely ordinary people. Even so, it was not to the extent that they did not need to eat. After standing here for half a day, they were indeed hungry. "Do you want to go back and rest?" Yin Nuoxing turned her head to look at the crowd. It was rare for her to speak to them. It might take a while to figure it out. The young man in blue rubbed his stomach and whispered, "I am indeed a little hungry. Uncle Lu, are you prepared?" Lu Weiran rolled her eyes and looked in the direction of the door. "The reserve troops are almost here. They are here to send us supplies. Well, just a meal." Not long after his voice fell, there was a burst of hurried footsteps from the direction of the door. More than a dozen people wearing a full set of magic tool battle robes rushed into the underground palace, their auras surging. Lu Weiran sensed that they seemed to have battled before and couldn't help but frown as she stepped forward to greet them. "How's the situation in the mystic realm?" "Sir, the changes in the environment have stabilized, and there shouldn't be any more changes in the next 12 hours. It's just that the situation outside isn't particularly good, but the situation in the underground palace is better," the new alliance cultivator quickly responded with a salute. "In other words, if we can't solve in a short period of time, we might have to retreat from here." Lu Weiran muttered. The newcomer nodded and said in a deep voice, "Sir, although this subordinate shouldn't talk too much, I still have to remind you that if there's really no other way, it's better to retreat as soon as possible. The situation in this secret realm is different from any secret realm we've ever controlled." Lu Weiran nodded and turned to everyone. "In short, let's take a break first." The young man in blue quickly ran to the big box that the newcomer was carrying. Although he was already prepared, he couldn't help but smile bitterly when he saw that it was full of lunchboxes. Lunchboxes? Didn't you order something more high-end? I want to eat lobster. Kid, you're used to eating delicacies. You're picky, aren't you? Uncle Lou almost smashed his chopsticks on the young man's head and punched him fiercely. "It's good that there's something for you to eat in this damn place. If you don't eat, you'll starve for a while." The young man in blue grimaced and looked back at Yin Nuashing. He was about to take another lunchbox, but he saw that Zhou Zibai had already taken it, so he could only give up. He took his portion and squatted in the corner. He sighed and put the food into his mouth with tears. His mind was full of things that flew in the sky, ran on the ground, and swam in the sea. Zhou Zibai came to Yin Nuashing's side and whispered, "Mr. Feng, why don't you take a break first?" Yin Nuashing turned his head and waved his hand at her. "Well, there's no need. We won't be hungry, and we won't be tired so easily. It's just, sometimes we lack patience, such as now." He looked at Hui with his arms crossed and sighed. "After a while, if there's still no clue, it's almost time for me to open the door violently." Zhou Zibai's expression stiffened, and she said weakly, "The door, won't it tear down the underground palace?" Yin Nuashing shook his head. Suddenly, he thought of something and said, "Compared to that, I think you should consider retreating." Zhou Zibai was startled. Just as she was about to speak, she heard him continue, "Well, let's take a look first. I have a hunch that there shouldn't be anything good inside. Maybe it's not what you're looking forward to." Tilting his head, Yin Nuashing saw the little girl biting her chopsticks thoughtfully. He sighed in his heart. The things in the Eight Elements world, no matter what the situation is, it won't be a good situation here. It's even more so for the natives of this world. If there are some old antiques hidden in it, it's actually better. With the strength of the locals, they don't have the ability to use those old antiques. Unless they blow themselves up, there won't be any danger. The quality of the old antiques in the Eight Elements world is top-notch in the Three Elements world. It's enough to last until the civilization of this planet breaks through the blue sky. However, just like how the origin energy and origin relics were a disaster rather than a blessing for order life forms, these ancient artifacts were still a rather frightening hidden danger. This was especially true in this place where the origin heavenly god's protection was ineffective. If anything were to happen to these ancient artifacts, they would definitely explode. If that happened, this entire void might sink, and unless something unexpected happened, they wouldn't be here, so they wouldn't know what happened. After a meal, it was another long wait. Looking at Hui and the little girl pondering, Yin Nuashing was about to doze off. At this time, he didn't know how much they were searching through their memories. If they couldn't find the exact location, it would be useless even if they knew the clues. Anyway, he didn't know these in his memory. He could only watch and see if Hui, who had a little impression, could come up with something. Hui was still puzzled by the stars all over the ground. He couldn't understand it no matter how he looked at it. From time to time, he would think of the number 61 that the little girl just said. Although it was the number of light beams on the door, he didn't quite understand the meaning of this number. Ah, the starry sky, you're just as maddening as the void. This stupid thing is making a brainless person like him start to have a headache. Why don't we just blow up the door? At worst, we'll blow up the things behind the door. This damn door doesn't look like the corresponding starry sky on the ground. What kind of constellation do you think these are? You even specially used a ray of light to mark them. Should I let Maple use the original light to compare the brightness? Speaking of which, there seemed to be people in the realm of the gods who had divided the stars in the starry sky into constellations. However, the people in the realm of the gods had lived for a long time. Once they wanted the information to keep up with time, it had to be updated continuously for more than 10 years. Sometimes, when the stars in the star region were blown up, the constellation might directly change shape. Therefore, not many people studied this thing. They just looked at it at night for fun. Constellation. Huey's mind was suddenly swept clean. As if he had caught on to something, he stood up abruptly. The little girl beside him was so scared that she stood up as well. She looked at him in confusion. What's wrong? Constellation. Huey suddenly punched the stone pillar beside him excitedly. The ground rumbled and shook for a while. He suddenly jumped up as if he had a stroke. Maple. I got it. Constellation. It's a constellation. Yin Nuashing, who was yawning on the other side, was shocked by the sudden shout. Her sleepiness dissipated by a lot. Everyone in the underground palace also looked over. Constellation? The blue-clothed youth hurriedly went over. His face was full of curiosity. What constellation? It's... Hui subconsciously wanted to answer. When he saw everyone coming over, he suddenly calmed down. He rolled his eyes and waved his hand at everyone. Cough, cough, wait a moment. After saying that, he pulled Maple to the side and pulled the little girl. The three of them gathered together and whispered softly. Everyone at the side was stunned. They were a little confused and stunned. The southern skies, 61 constellations. When Yin Nuashing heard Hui mention this name, she frowned thoughtfully. After thinking for a long time, she still determined that he did not have this memory. I don't have any impression, because you don't know about this. Hui said softly, that's something that happened in the neighboring world of the realm of the gods. Although it refers to the 61 constellations, it's not really a constellation. The southern skies, 61 constellations, but it's not really a constellation. Yin Nuashing tilted her head and thought for a while. She said, are you saying that it's a representation of 61 people? You went to the neighbor's place? Yes, something bad happened there. Because it's the neighbor of the realm of the gods, I went to deal with it. At that time, you were in seclusion, so I didn't bring you there. It was also during that time that I learned a lot of things. The southern skies' 61 constellations are equivalent to the ruler of their family. There's a total of 61 people. As we spoke, his expression became a little serious. Also, to be precise, it was actually a request for help. I brought people there to deal with it urgently. Request for help. Yin Nuashing took a deep breath and began to think of the worst. What happened? Hui looked in her eyes and said word by word, chaos attack. The little girl was stunned. The atmosphere changed instantly. She raised her head and looked at Yin Nuashing. This guy's atmosphere changed from a guy who was staring blankly at the sky with a bored expression to a dangerous person who was ready to destroy the void at any time. That was probably the first time I encountered the true power of chaos. Although I was already at the peak of origin in the 47th era and had begun to prepare for the path to the primeval realm, my understanding of order and chaos was far less than in the 51st era and now. At that time, I could recognize it, but I couldn't. Which part of it you couldn't recognize? Yin Nuashing narrowed her eyes. Now that I think about it, Hui raised his head and fell silent. He was probably recalling and comparing. After thinking seriously for a long time, he slowly said, maybe it's the power of chaos at the level of the concept body of chaos. In the 47th era, it fought to the neighboring realm of the gods. The little girl almost choked to death when she heard this. Her face was full of horror. It shouldn't be wrong. But it's a relatively lazy kind. That is, it doesn't have a strong will to fight. Moreover, it's not a clone of the concept body of chaos or something else. It should be a power that was divided. It's equivalent to the power of chaos that directly affects the divine shadow clan. It's just that this time, It didn't encounter a carrier and attacked in the form of pure energy. Yin Nuashing took a deep breath and asked, "What happened after that?" After that, your neighbor is gone. Hui scratched his head and laughed dryly as he said this. Yin Nuashing and the little girl were stunned. Defeated by the power of chaos? We used the power of chaos. Hui gritted his teeth and smiled bitterly. After holding it in for a while, he stammered, "Repelled it? Yes, repelled it. Then, when it left, it swept the entire continent away." Yin Nuashing and the little girl, "You call that repelled?" This bastard was basically saying, after paying the price of 10 million lives, we finally ushered in victory. The enemy fled pathetically and even swept our house away. Anyway, it sounds more like fled pathetically. The little girl couldn't help but say, "But that's the situation that day." We couldn't help but smile bitterly. When our situation was getting more and more dangerous and terrible, I was ready to call for all the power of the realm of the gods to help at that time. It was also at this time that the power of chaos suddenly swept the continent that had turned into a purgatory and rushed into the void. It began to disintegrate and explode. The scattered power of chaos melted into the void. Then there was no then. Everyone present was in a state of confusion. I was still holding the magic circle like an idiot, ready to call for the power of the realm of the gods. I almost asked for your help. All in all, that was the first time in my life that I encountered the power of chaos. Then, it was barely a Pyrrhic victory. Huey's smile became even more bitter as he spoke. Even if the power of the chaos concept body was a little lazy, the power of the chaos concept body had turned the entire continent into a mess and almost wiped out. This was the outcome of the first battle with the chaos. And at that time, he hadn't reacted. After the surprise attack by the power of chaos, there weren't many people left on that continent. They were all brought back to the realm of the gods. 9 eras have passed, and it has long become one with the realm of the gods. Yin Nuashing turned to look at the stone door that manifested the starry sky. The message here, is it left for the people of that continent? Or is it that the message is to guide us to recall what happened on that continent? Maybe the latter. Hui also tilted his head. It was its fortune to be born with the realm of the gods. Because of that, it received conditions that other worlds didn't have. Its light was completely overshadowed by the realm of the gods, which was its misfortune. Therefore, even if it was a rather strong continent, not many people knew about it. The message left here is obviously to inform those who can understand this message, including the thing behind the door. The three of them fell silent at the same time. The one who left the secret realm here was either the life form that destroyed the continent or the people from the realm of the gods who knew about it. The little girl blinked and turned her head to whisper, "If that's the case, do we still have to bring people in? If we bring people in and continue exploring, won't it be dangerous? After all, it's something from the 8 elements realm." This is also a very difficult problem to solve. Hui smiled bitterly and scratched his head. The three of them turned to look at the people who were waiting in the distance. Everyone was startled when they noticed that the three of them were looking at them with slightly strange gazes. These thoughtful gazes made it easy for people to think of a bad thing. "Do you think I should shout at them to go back now?" Hui smiled bitterly in a low voice. "They will think that we want to monopolize the secret realm." Yin Nuashing spread her hands. "How about using spiritual suggestion?" "No, they're not ordinary people. We have to use a little bit more power than just a little bit. But if we use spiritual suggestion, I'm afraid that if we don't control it well, we will turn them into fools." Hui smiled bitterly. It was only at times like this, when they had to use a little bit more power, that they couldn't control themselves. They were completely used to the situation where they went on a killing spree in the void. Even if they were in a self-sealing state at this moment, their energy was not completely quiet. If they wanted to return to the situation where they only used a little bit of power a long time ago, they would have to calm down again for a long time. Right now, they were still in a flammable and explosive state. Then there's no other way. Yin Nuashing let out a long sigh of relief and hinted with her eyes, "Be careful when you walk. Now, open the door. If we don't go in and take a look, we won't know what message the person who came here left behind." "All right, Let's take one step at a time. It's easy now that we know that it's the 61 constellations of the southern sky. I remember the pattern of the 61 people. If there are no accidents, the 61 light beams should be exactly where they are. Hui nodded and skipped towards the forest of stone pillars. He pushed the stone pillars back and forth again. This time, it wasn't as if there was no reaction after pushing for a long time. With the activation of rules and logic, the stone pillars that were illuminated by the light beams suddenly lit up brightly. The entire stone pillars were dyed in the color of the starry sky by that ray of light. Oh, there's movement again. The blue-clothed young man immediately jumped up. This time, it will definitely open the door, right? If there are no accidents, Yin Nuoxing, who walked out from the forest of stone pillars, casually replied when she heard this. So, little sister, do you know the mystery of this place? The blue-clothed young man asked curiously. Everyone also pricked up their ears curiously. You can say that. Yin Nuoxing nodded and gave a simple response. She didn't intend to continue speaking. This made everyone who wanted to listen to the secret of this place helplessly suppress the curiosity in their hearts. In the next few minutes, Hui quickly returned the 61 constellations of the southern sky to their positions. Yin Nuoxing noticed that when every stone pillar was placed in the correct position, the mysterious pattern on the ground would spread with a silver luster, as if something was about to be activated at the beginning. The starry sky-colored stone door would also tremble slightly, and a handful of dust would fall. Buzz. After the 61 stone pillars were placed in the correct position, the mysterious pattern on the ground all lit up with a silver light. The starry sky stone door's light fell on the stone pillars and faintly reflected in the air, blending with the silver light. At the place where the light converged, everyone vaguely seemed to see a vast and boundless starry sky. They saw a huge island floating in the starry sky, covered with billions of stars like stars surrounding the moon. Oh my, this even projected the pattern of the realm of the gods. We returned to Maple's side and saw the scene in the light. He almost sucked in a breath of cold air. The pattern of the realm of the gods floating in midair turned into fragments of silver light and exploded in the next second. It turned into specks of silver dust in midair and drilled into the starry sky gate in front of them. The gate also lit up with countless energy lusters with a click. The two gates silently opened inwards, revealing another similarly dim and dark space. Everyone who had been waiting for a long time became slightly excited when they saw this. Although it may not be of any use, I still want to mention it. We glanced inside and scratched his head as he looked at everyone. According to the history left behind in this place, it's most likely not fun inside. You spent so much effort to open the gate and not go in to have a look? The young man in blue couldn't help but mutter. He looked at everyone and frowned with a slightly unwilling look. He held the back of his head and said casually, I don't care if there's anything inside. I just want to walk around inside. What kind of strange request is this? Hui was stunned. This is just walk around inside. The young man in blue nodded and smiled bitterly in his heart. After all, this is the mission requirement. But someone couldn't help but say, that's enough. Lu Weiran waved her hand and walked in front. She turned around and looked at everyone. They opened the gate. If you think that you can know more than others after being in a daze here for more than 10 hours, just rush forward. But if anything happens, you'll be responsible. Everyone instantly fell silent. Lu Weiran turned to Hui and said softly, we'll simply explore. If there's something wrong, you can give the order and all of us will turn back. Okay? Okay, let's go. Hui nodded. Lu Weiran also nodded and led the people of the Alliance inside. Our Alliance will lead the way. Pay attention to your surroundings. I feel that the atmosphere has changed. When everyone walked through the gate, Lu Wuxing, who was walking at the back, couldn't help but smack his lips. What's with the arrogance? Giving orders after opening the gate. Maybe it's just luck. He stretched out his hand and pressed on his shoulder, shaking his head. Lu Wuxing saw this and could only reluctantly shut his mouth. The group walked into the space of the gate and felt that the surrounding temperature dropped by more than 10 degrees Celsius. An inexplicable chill surged into their bodies. Then, endless darkness swallowed all the remaining light in front of them. In the darkness, everyone immediately tried to spread out their divine sense. But after trying for a while, they couldn't sense anything. Their ears could only hear the sound of footsteps. In front of them was darkness where they couldn't see their own fingers. They couldn't see anyone and could only hear sounds. The nameless fear was like a demon's claw that squeezed their hearts. Even their breathing could not help but stop. Breathe. Concentrate. A faint voice suddenly rang out in the darkness, causing everyone who was about to be swallowed by the darkness to come back to their senses. Maintain your steps. If you can't maintain your consciousness, then count how many steps you've taken. Zhou Zibai heard the voice coming from the side. She couldn't help but stretch out her hand to feel around. Soon, she touched an arm. She subconsciously grasped it and asked nervously, "Feng Ling, is that you?" "I'm here, don't worry." The response from the side made Zhou Zibai breathe a sigh of relief. This place, it's a bit strange. Even my divine sense has been swallowed. I can't even go an inch out of my body. The voice of the blue-clothed youth came from the darkness, causing a commotion. Is it too late for me to quit now? Hui suddenly let out 2 sinister laughs. I just told you. It's too late to regret now. Look behind you. Everyone swallowed their saliva and looked back. It was endless darkness. The light in the underground palace had completely disappeared. They didn't know when the gate had been closed silently. Looking back at the front, there was endless darkness. It was dark and deep, as if something existed in the darkness. Chapter 1767. In the endless darkness, many places seemed to be similar. The darkness seemed to be similar, and the faint suppression seemed to be similar. However, it was not as pure as the void. In fact, the darkness here was just darkness. The space was not narrow. In the senses of Yin Nuoxing and Hui, the space in this place was actually slowly getting bigger. Taking out a light at this moment was actually TSK, the flashlight doesn't work. Can this place even swallow light? The sound of a switch clicking in the darkness made Hui, who had just come up with this idea, laugh dryly in his heart. It seemed that ordinary light would not work. The darkness here was, after all, well, it was probably pure darkness that suppressed some senses. They should be able to use a little energy to illuminate it. However, at this time, they should not do those eye-catching things. When they opened the door, it had become very suspicious. They came out for a vacation and did not want to get into trouble. It was better to keep a low profile for the rest of the journey. When Hui made up his mind to control himself, the surrounding scene seemed to begin to glow slightly. There's light. It's gradually brightening. The blue-clothed young man's muttering made everyone quickly hold their breath and look around. The first place where a faint light began to appear was the road beneath their feet. A deep blue color appeared in the dusky darkness. Many spots of light appeared faintly on the ground and gradually became brighter. The area was also continuously expanding. When the blue road beneath their feet became very clear, the scene in front of them also became very clear. When the eyes that were looking forward caught sight of this scene, some people could not help but exclaim softly. Their voices were filled with amazement and disbelief. The light of billions of stars turned into the only light in this dim setting, flickering in the distance. The light of the endless falling stars turned into substance, paving a starry avenue under their feet that led to the galaxy. In the distance, there were stars flashing in front of their eyes, dragging a long tail like a distant meteor. In the place where the meteor disappeared, a huge shadow revealed its true body with a rapid bright light. It was a huge planet. Its huge volume lay directly in front of the starry avenue, looking very oppressive. The bright light came from the right side. Some people turned their heads curiously and took a few steps back when they saw the source of the light. It was a fiery red giant, huge in size. As long as you turn around, you could see its magnificent figure. It was as if you could reach out and touch it. It was the most expansive background in the starry sky. The red giant was actually very far away from them, but because it was so huge, it looked very close to them. Furthermore, there was definitely some energy or rules left behind here that had been processed. With their self-sealed, mortal bodies, they could directly see the outline of the star without being blinded by the endless sea of light. This could only mean that there had been some kind of arrangement here. It should have been done deliberately by the person who left behind the secret realm. Wow! Zhou couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice, "The starry sky." I didn't expect to see the starry sky in this life. She suddenly leaned close to Yin Nuoxing's ear and whispered, "Mr. Feng, is this what you saw in the starry sky?" "Well, from our point of view, it is indeed so." Yin Nuoxing nodded slightly and said, "The starry sky left behind in this secret realm is a real starry sky. It is a place that has been artificially processed, so your eyes can directly capture the faint traces of light instead of being drowned out by the fire of the sun. With your eyes, you should not be able to see such a scene. What you see should only be lumps of scorching light. It can't be called a beautiful scene. In fact, if you really came to the normal starry sky with such a scene, you would have been burned to death or died of lack of oxygen, or your bodies would explode from the air." Zhou Zhibai couldn't help but smile bitterly and said, "That is to say, someone deliberately left this scene so that we can see such a magnificent starry sky." Hui tilted his head and looked at Feng and said in their souls, "How is it? Is it the starry sky of the realm of the gods?" "No, it's just an ordinary starry sky. There is no shadow of the realm of the gods here." Yin Nuoxing shook her head, and the senses that she had secretly released were now retracting from a distant place. "The starry sky is very large, and the rules are complete. It is not the rules of the eight elements realm. There should be nothing to pay attention to. For most living beings, the starry sky was a fantasy country that they yearned for, but could not reach. It was not easy to come to a place that was exactly the same as the starry sky outside, so they emptied their minds and stared with all their might. They even took out their phones and other things and had the time to take a panoramic view. "Feng Ling here." Zhou Zhibai wanted to say something to Yin Nuoxing, but when she turned around, she saw the three of them huddled together and discussing something. From time to time, they stretched out their fingers and pointed at the starry sky, as if they had found something worth paying attention to. Zhou Zhibai couldn't help but smile bitterly. Speaking of which, Mr. Feng and the other two seemed to be able to cross the starry sky at any time. They might have seen such a scene too many times, so they were not too amazed. They were more concerned about the space of the secret realm itself. "Look, there is something in front." Someone suddenly pointed to the front and said, drawing everyone's attention from the starry sky to the front. They all turned their heads and looked forward. At the end of the avenue of stars under their feet was a huge platform. It was simply a platform suspended in the starry sky. There was nothing special about it, and they couldn't see anything around it. The last part of the avenue of stars took them a full half an hour to successfully reach the platform. Standing here and looking into the distance, it was as if they were looking at another piece of land. The hundreds of people standing on the square platform were like a grain of rice. They didn't know how spacious the platform was. In the center of the platform was a mark engraved on the ground. If they calculated the area, it should be 1/10 of the size of the platform. It was a sea urchin mark. "This place is empty." Lu Weiran looked around and quietly looked back at the three people walking in the middle of the group. She thought for a moment, then said to the people of the Alliance, "Let's gather first. The situation here is strange. It is not what we thought. If we are separated and encounter something, it will be difficult to deal with it." It took them more than 10 minutes to jog from the landing point to the center of the huge platform. At this time, everyone had more or less recovered from the shock and amazement of the starry sky. They focused their attention on the platform in front of them. Only now did they notice that it was empty. If the wind blew, there was nothing to block it. They couldn't help but be stunned. Is there really nothing? Maybe there is something. It just depends on whether someone is willing to take it out. A strange voice suddenly sounded from the side, startling everyone. They turned their heads to look in the direction of the voice. It was the big guy from the Liu family whose brain was full of muscles. The atmosphere suddenly became strange. What are you looking at? Did I say something wrong? Lu Wuxing rolled his eyes at everyone and spat on the ground. He cursed at Yin Nuoxing and the others and shouted, "We've already come this far. Are you still planning to hide it?" Everyone's expression was strange. This guy's words, Yin Nuoxing and the others were discussing the design and layout of the space. Before they could figure out what was inside, they were suddenly shouted at. The three of them were also stunned. They looked at each other, with the words "this guy has a problem with his brain" written all over their faces. They then lowered their heads and continued to mutter, ignoring him. Lu Wuxing, who was directly ignored, was so angry that the veins on his head were about to explode. He was already hostile to Yin Nuo planet, and now he was angry. Just as he was about to walk forward, the blue-clothed young man suddenly blocked his way. Hey, you idiot whose brain is full of muscles. Did you eat the wrong medicine when you were born? The blue-clothed youth crossed his arms in front of him and blocked his path. He turned his head and looked at Lu Yi. You don't plan to control your own people? It's not wise to let him go out and bite anyone he catches. Everyone rolled their eyes. You're just a little firecracker of the imperial capital. No one has the right to talk about others. Lu Yi looked at Lu Weiran, who was about to turn her attention to them. He stepped forward and pulled Lu Wuxing. He shook his head at him and pulled him back without saying anything. The blue-clothed youth rolled his eyes and curled his lips. The Lu family is really hard. They spent so much effort to raise this guy. Unfortunately, he's a guy whose brain is full of muscles. He's also a brainless guy who doesn't want to listen to anyone. Lu Yi can hold him down once or twice, but he can't hold him down forever. Looking at how this guy with grass growing on his head is holding back his energy to cause trouble, I'm afraid he'll cause trouble. The sound of cursing suddenly disappeared. Yin Nuoxing also shifted his attention slightly. He raised his head and saw the blue-clothed young man revealing a bright smile at him. He used his eyeballs to point at Lu Wuxing, who was nestled at the side. He could not help but roll his eyes at the young man. Well, the space here is hidden by the rules. It will take a while to unlock it in this state. A faint light flickered in Huey's hand, and a looming chain appeared in his palm. Compared to this, is it really okay for us to unlock it layer by layer like this? The owner of the secret realm doesn't seem to want outsiders to touch the things hidden here. Otherwise, he wouldn't have put a mystery at the door and an empty shell to hide everything. Yin Nuoxing nodded. The situation here seemed to be like this. The door was the first layer of encryption, and there was a hidden thing behind the door. These things were not left for ordinary people to see. These things could not be unlocked by the creatures of the three elements realm. They were left for special people to check the situation, or they were left for themselves in the future. However, he still did not understand why they left these things in the three elements realm. Those who had the ability to cross realms and left behind things that could not be destroyed for several eras had to be at least in the divine realm. Why did they leave these things in the three elements realm? Why did they leave them in the three elements realm? The traces of the eight elements realm are a disaster in the lower elements realm. The little girl suddenly spread her hands and sighed. When I was wandering around in the greater elements realm, I saw some things from the upper elements realm in the lower elements realm. Most of them are from the eight elements realm. A small portion is left behind by people from the seven elements realm. For the people of the lower elements realm, touching them casually will result in destruction. Hui laughed bitterly. This is quite rare in the entire void. Our world is already in such a situation. There shouldn't be many who still have the mood to go to the lower elements realm. Not many. The little girl continued to spread her hands. But just one is dangerous enough. Trash needs to be sorted. Other places have the effect of shielding and suppressing, except for this place. You see, isn't this situation exactly the same as that extremely dangerous situation? Let's assume that the power left behind by Feng Ling in this world is at full capacity and in its complete state. If one is not careful, it will explode. We thought carefully. Then, I think the three elements realm might have to go through a lot of trouble to repair it on a large scale. Yin Nuoxing, don't talk about me in front of me. Cough, cough. Hui coughed dryly. The ball of light in his hand suddenly emitted a brighter light. Then it exploded with a bang, turning into fragments of light and dissipating in the starry sky. He laughed softly and said, "All right, then I won't talk about you. We should move on. No matter what is hidden here in the end, since we are here, how can we not cause trouble? Cough, cough. How can we not take a look around? The rules of this space have been broken by brute force." Yes, it was a brute force break this time. Although the scale was a little small and there was no movement, the space had not officially changed. It still needed a little stimulation. Got it. I'll let you open the way. We looked around and found that the blue-clothed youth was strolling around with nothing to do. He suddenly grinned and flicked his finger. A gust of wind blew through the starry sky. The blue-clothed youth had just lifted his left foot when the gust of wind that contained the aura of the starry sky suddenly blew past, causing him to stagger. He staggered 2 steps forward and stepped on the sea urchin symbol in the center of the platform. He fell flat on his face. Buzz! The buzzing sound of energy suddenly sounded. Everyone on the platform was shocked. They turned their eyes abruptly and saw the small firecracker lying on the sea urchin symbol. The symbol emitted a faint white and orange light. Suddenly, some white shadows appeared in the starry sky in front of the platform. It was as if something was floating from the starry sky little by little. The white color faded and became solid. A starry avenue leading to the starry sky appeared in front of them. It was a slender passage with hundreds of millions of stars surging. Compared to the passage dotted with stars just now, it was more like a long river cast by light. At the end of the long river, in the distance, there was another vast scene. A huge floating island was quietly suspended in the starry sky. Its length and width made it difficult to take in the entire floating island at one time. Its majestic size was more shocking than a star. Just looking at it made people's hearts tremble. You fell and created the road? The blue-clothed youth scratched his head and jogged forward with a smile. Since when did you have a talent for luck? When everyone saw the bridge that looked like a river of stars, they hurriedly ran over. However, this road that looked like it was made of countless streams of light did not look very safe. They kept feeling that if they stepped on it, they would fall into the starry sky. Although this starry sky scene could no longer be described with common sense. It's amazing. This passage is completely cast by light. The 2-4 realm elders of the Alliance couldn't help but sigh. The ancient powerhouses could still do this. I can't imagine what kind of grand scene it would have been in that distant time. Lu Weiran stood in front of the bridge of light and pondered for a moment. He nodded to everyone and stepped on the bridge. The moment his foot touched the ground, his body suddenly turned into a fiery red ball of light. With a whoosh, he rushed toward the top of the bridge. When everyone saw this, they couldn't help but exclaim in amazement. They looked at the light that Lu Weiran had turned into for a while and saw that he was fine. They also walked onto the bridge cast by light and turned into balls of light that rushed toward the floating island. A passage for the transformation of energy form. We studied it for a while and nodded. As expected, this was left behind by the people of the destroyed continent. This is the passage from their home. I haven't seen the exact same technology in the starry sky yet. The 3 of them also turned into balls of energy and surged on the bridge of light. We then continued. It seems to be made with reference to the characteristic of turning into energy form for a short while after crossing the world barrier. In fact, it contains a lot of the power of rules. In terms of speed, it seems to be able to reach the level where there is no speed limit in the form of rules, which is instant transmission. That island seems to have been torn off from something. The little girl's voice came, causing Yin Nuashing and Hui to turn their gazes. The huge island floating in the starry sky had an overlooking angle of more than 100 million miles. It was fine to look at it from the front, but if one looked at the side of the floating island, one could clearly see that there was a huge tear on the side and directly behind them. It seemed to have been forcibly torn off from somewhere. There were many huge pieces of broken stone floating on the other side of the tear. Under the illumination of countless starlight, countless shadows were cast on the back of the island. It looked a little shocking. We looked at foam. Energy traces? Zero. Well, for the time being, there is no energy. But this island doesn't look like a product of the three elements realm. Look at its huge size. There is no need to think about it. It is definitely a special product of our eight elements realm. The only thing we pay special attention to in the eight elements realm is the size. It has to be big. Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes. He could not deny this point. A city in the Pantheon realm could easily span hundreds of thousands of miles. Ordinary planets with life were dozens of times larger than the planets here. The same was true for the size of stars, not to mention the size of galaxies. Just like the floating island in front of them that spanned 100 million miles. In short, this thing was definitely a product of the eight elements realm, and it was only a part of it that was torn off. They did not know how big the main body was. The teleportation on the Galaxy Avenue ended in 10 minutes. Balls of light landed on the floating island and returned to their original form. They looked around and saw that there were also buildings on the huge floating island. In addition, there were also mountain ranges. It seemed to be divided into many huge regions. It was a completely different world. When they arrived on the floating island, they saw that there were countless pieces of debris of different sizes floating in the starry sky around the floating island. It was difficult to count how many pieces of debris there were in each of the rings. I'm afraid there are more pieces of debris here than in the asteroid belt. Their sizes are generally bigger than that. Could it be that a huge planet was blown up here? Someone could not help but ask. We wanted to say that it was the dandruff that was produced when it was blown up. Well, seeing the serious atmosphere here, he did not say it. The buildings in the distance were hidden in the wilderness and mountains. Everyone could only see the corners. They were skyscrapers. Things that were even more exaggerated than skyscrapers. They were thousands of meters tall for the 5,000 meters tall, and even 50 to 60,000 meters tall. They stood there like giant towers that reached the sky. They were even taller than the mountains in front of them. Just by looking at their height and size, they could feel a sense of heaviness. I think so. The blue-clothed young man suddenly raised his hand to attract everyone's attention. I think there should be a small problem. Lu Weiran was startled. What problem? The blue-clothed young man rubbed his hands. We seem to have been exploring this place as a secret realm left behind by the strong people of ancient times, right? Everyone nodded suspiciously. That was right. Didn't they say that it was a cave or a secret realm left behind by the heavenly realm or the immortal among immortals? There should be many people here who have some understanding of the ancient times. All of you, right? At our level, more or less, we should have some understanding of that era, right? Everyone nodded again, but this time, only 2/3 of the people nodded, indicating that they did have some understanding of that era. The blue-clothed young man pointed at the tall tower at the end of the mountain. Do you think there would be a building of this scale on Earth thousands of years ago? Buildings 30 to 40,000 meters tall, 50 to 60,000 meters tall, covering millions of hectares of mountainous land. In the past, there were caves and secret realms that had existed for too long and could no longer be hidden and were exposed to the sea. Or in desolate places, there were also broken buildings and some things there. You should have seen them all, right? No? Well, Uncle Lou, you must know. Lu Weiran shrugged. I've learned about all the things that I can get in touch with in the country. I can only touch the corners of the news abroad. Well, what do you want to say? Be straightforward. I've said what I wanted to say. Don't you think this place is very strange? This mountain, this building, this place, the cave of a mortal immortal that was exposed a year ago. I don't believe that no one here has really not been there. The blue-clothed young man glanced at everyone. Seeing that they were all lowering their heads and scratching their heads in embarrassment, he laughed. You've all been there. You're all people who have seen blood. Why are you pretending to be embarrassed? How do you think the architectural style and scale of that place are compared to this place? Take a look for yourselves. Indeed, many places are different. Whether it's the style or the size, they're all too abnormal. It's like the traces of another civilization. Lu Weiran nodded solemnly. General Lu, are you trying to say aliens? Someone muttered in a low voice. Then he laughed and scratched his head embarrassedly. I'm just saying, how old am I to still believe in such things? The blue-robed young man grinned and coughed lightly to draw everyone's attention. Ahem, what I mean is, this place is too weird. It doesn't make sense. I don't have a good feeling about it. Why don't we just leave? If you're scared, you can go back by yourself. Don't bring us along to hide your cowardice. The small firecrackers of the imperial capital are nothing more than this. Someone couldn't help but laugh. The blue-clothed young man's expression changed. He glared fiercely at that person and said coldly, "It seems that the last time in the secret realm of the mortal immortal, you didn't hurt enough. What? Who gave you the courage to dance on my face now? There are only so few people from your family here. It's not enough for me to eat. If you're not convinced, come, let's fight. All right, stop talking. If you want to quarrel, go outside." Lu Weiran waved her hand and looked at the blue-clothed young man. "You mean?" The blue-clothed youth scratched his head and laughed dryly. "Uncle Lu, I really have a bad feeling about this. Last time, when I told you about it in the mystic realm, it happened after a while. I can't possibly lie to you." Then, Lu Weiran hesitated for a moment. "Should we retreat? Let's go. I'm afraid we won't be able to escape if we're late." Chapter 1768. The endless starry sky was another starry sky that no one was familiar with. It was not the familiar starry sky that they had seen for 20 to 30 years, where they could clearly recognize the Big Dipper, Southern Dipper, Orion, and many other constellations. This starry sky erased the vastness and amazement in front of them, revealing layer by layer. It did not even need to be revealed completely. Just by slapping themselves in the face, they could feel an abnormal feeling. It was so abnormal that, in short, it felt like something was wrong everywhere. When they first came to this starry sky, they already had this feeling. It was just that they were blinded by the vast galaxy in front of them, so they did not fully realize the situation until now. Their line of sight crossed the dried river, the cracked riverbed, and then the mountains. What entered their eyes was a stretch of towering mountains and buildings. They did not know how long they had been here. Perhaps it was because they stood in the starry sky, or perhaps it was because their quality was very good, but they still stood tall in front of them after countless years. It was very strange and abnormal. When these two situations were put together, it was very easy to feel fear. Right now, they were only a little panicked, but after a while, they could not say for sure, for example, something else would happen. The buzzing sound of energy was like the rumbling of a huge machine. The sound that rang in his ears started from a high pitch and slowly lowered its pitch. The sound also gradually lowered and gradually disappeared. The blue-clothed youth and the others suddenly turned their heads. The starry sky bridge, made of billions of light, suddenly lost its luster and became dim. In a few breaths of time, it completely disappeared and disappeared. Everyone saw this scene. There was only the starry sky in front of them, and the platform that was abnormally far away. There was no way back. A chill instantly emerged from the bottom of their hearts and quickly spread throughout their bodies. Well, it seems like there is no way back this time. The blue-clothed youth pinched his bitter face and smiled bitterly at Lu Weiran. "Uncle Lu, what did I say?" Lu Weiran was also a little stunned by this scene that suddenly appeared and cut off their path. After a moment, he helplessly sighed. "There is no other way. We can only continue forward." He looked at everyone and coughed dryly to clear his throat. "There is nothing to say now. This secret realm, perhaps it has exceeded our expectations from the beginning. But since we have already come here and the path is cut off, there is no use in saying discouraging words. The only thing we can do is to continue forward. For this starry sky bridge to be built, there should be something left here, such as some devices, some machines. It is too early to say that we are giving up. Let's continue forward. Go to that city and take a look. Maybe we can find some clues. Of course, if you feel that there is no hope and that there is no way to move, then it is not too late to come back to find you all." When everyone heard this, they rolled their eyes in their hearts. At this moment, staying in the same place was tantamount to suicide. Who knew where the new path would appear? They were scared of this damn place. Although nothing had happened yet, they were already a little scared. The unknown was the easiest thing to arouse the uneasiness in the heart. Coincidentally, There was nothing in this space that they knew. Low sighs could be heard from a group. They looked back at the disappearing path of the starry sky, shook their heads, and continued to move forward. At this point, everyone slowly thought of a question. Could it be that this place was not a secret realm at all? All the secret realms and caves that they had encountered in the past, none of them had hidden things so deeply, and there would not be such a strange thing. But it seemed that it was too late to think of this matter now. Yin Nuashing looked back at the starry sky and said in the soul, "Did you blow up that bridge?" I was just about to ask you that. Hui was startled when he heard this. "I thought you blew up the bridge first when you heard that they were going to retreat." The two of them looked at each other, then looked at the little girl again to confirm that this matter had nothing to do with the three of them. After confirming that this matter had nothing to do with the three of them, they looked at each other again for a while, then calmly said in their hearts, "Oh, all right, this is the rhythm of something is going to happen. I just don't know what it is. It must be you who forced them to do this. It must be you, the prophecy emperor's fault." Hui and Yin Nuashing both spoke at the same time, then looked at each other fiercely and bared their teeth in protest. The little girl at the side covered her eyes. These two they were too good at throwing the blame away. "Don't say any more. It must be the two of you." For the next part of the journey, Yin Nuashing and Hui desperately tried to get rid of their relationship, throwing the blame on each other's head one after another. They were just short of digging up old scores. The distance from the landing point to the city in the distance was very far. With the speed of everyone's nonstop trotting, they crossed over a plain, crossed over a mountain range, and used a full 6 to 8 hours to reach the city. These 8 hours are enough for us to rush from the northernmost point of Huaxia country to the southernmost point. The blue-clothed youth put his hands on his waist and panted. He couldn't help but roll his eyes. Isn't this place a little too big? After crossing over a mountain range, the city was in front of them. They had yet to descend from the mountain and stood halfway up the mountain, but it was difficult to take in the entire city in their eyes. Those huge buildings that reached the sky had now transformed into tall towers in front of them, which were abnormally grand. This city, Lu Weiran wiped the sweat from her forehead and let out a long breath. After looking down for a moment, she couldn't help but fall silent. "I'm afraid it's bigger than the entire Huaxia country. Is there such an exaggerated span?" Everyone was shocked. "I've always been very confident in my grasp of distance. I've once overlooked the great rivers and mountains of Huaxia country from a height of 10,000 meters. Although I can't say that I can see it all at once, I can still make a rough estimate. It's not more than 3% different from the real area." Lu Weiran silently stretched out her hand and pointed forward from the extreme left all the way to the extreme right. "We should be at an altitude of 5,000 meters. Just from the position we're standing at now, the part that we can see in front of us is already half the size of Huaxia country. This doesn't include the part that we can't see. There's a mountain next to us that should be 3 times the height of this mountain. Do you want to go there and take a look?" Everyone looked at each other. Some wanted to look at the city in front of them, while others wanted to look at the mountain next to them. They hesitated for a while and couldn't make up their minds. Let's go. It's rare to see it, so it's good to go and take a look. If we go up there, I might be able to see it more clearly." The young man in blue waved his hand and took the lead to run toward the mountain. Everyone was a little helpless when they saw that. When they saw Lu Weiran shrugging and following him, they were even more helpless. The location of the two mountains was not very far away. With their physical fitness, climbing the mountain was not a problem at all. As long as there was no sudden vacuum or lack of air in the starry sky, they would be fine even if they went to the stratosphere. About an hour later, they arrived at the top of the pointed mountain. "I'll climb to the top and look down on all the other mountains." The young man in blue stood at a height of 16,000 meters and looked down at the entire ground. The scenery, the vast mountains and rivers, and the exotic scenery made him feel a surge of anger brewing in his heart. However, after a long time, he only managed to brew this sentence. He couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief and felt refreshed. This place is really not bad. Putting aside the strange feeling, climbing a mountain is not bad. Let's go to Mount Everest someday. We can't go up Mount Everest in recent years. Don't even think about it. Lu Weiran rolled his eyes at him. Standing on the top of the mountain, he turned around and straightened his back little by little. He also felt the feeling of looking down on the world. He looked at the city that had become a little smaller, but it was wider and harder to see the city clearly. He also looked at the tower in front of him that seemed to be impossible to see the top no matter how hard he climbed. He could not help but frown. This obviously did not look like a building that could be built by humans. How is it? Do you see anything? Someone could not help but interrupt his thoughts. Lu Weiran looked around slightly and pondered for a moment. I still can't see a complete thing. Based on the general idea. No need to give a general idea. A voice suddenly sounded, startling everyone. They turned around and saw the young man in blue standing on his tiptoes with his hands on his waist and looking at the entire land. He tilted his head slightly and grinned at everyone. The longest horizontal distance of this city is about 3 times the circumference of the equator, more than 120,000 kilometers. Everyone was speechless. This place is not round. As long as your eyes are good enough, you can see infinitely far places. The young man in blue pointed at the farthest end, then at his feet, and finally at his eyes. My eyes are pretty good. As long as the height is high enough, I can see. We touch his chin. 200,000 kilometers in length and width. The size of a medium to large city in the realm of the gods. This was indeed a product of the 8 elements realm. Is this something that humans can build? Someone mumbled, causing Yin Nuo Xing and the other 2 to roll their eyes. Although this was not purely man-made, it was basically a place for people to live in. Don't be fooled by the scale of this place. In a city, there were mountains and rivers, huge landmark buildings, and also ordinary houses and pavilions. Aren't those sesame pea-sized black shadows below the small houses? Those buildings, pagodas, and palaces that were easily tens of thousands of feet high were all places where special people lived. Those were the kind that couldn't be climbed up without some skills. If ordinary people lived in them, they would have to climb 10,000 floors every day. Just thinking about it was scary. And the estimated itinerary for the day was, get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and go downstairs. That's it. The whole day's itinerary was spent climbing stairs. If necessary, it might take a few days. Well, I heard that there was a thing called an elevator, which was specially used to deal with such tall buildings. Going up and down in a straight line would save you the pain of climbing stairs. But going up and down 10,000 floors was probably going to be tough. 2 floors in a second. It would take more than an hour to go up and down. Forget it. Let's not talk about this topic. The internal space of this thing is a teleportation function. Yin Nuoxing yawned in response to Huey's sarcastic topic. As you said, this is not a place for ordinary people. There's also a palace over there that is 20,000 feet high. Do you want to explore in depth? No. Hui smiled bitterly. Everyone walked around the peak a few times and took a few photos. They began to wonder what they were doing here. They looked at the mobile phones in everyone's hands and fell silent. Climbing the mountain felt great, but going down the mountain felt a little weak in the knees. With a height of 16,000 meters, going down the mountain was like jumping bungee jumping. They could clearly feel their bones and organs trembling. If they missed a step, they didn't know if they would fall to their deaths given their physical strength. After spending more than 2 hours descending from the mountain, everyone's hands and feet were already trembling. They rested on the spot for a while before walking into the city in front of them. After crossing the entrance of the city wall and walking inside, it was as if they had experienced a time travel and arrived at another place in another period of the ancient era. As for the age of the buildings, it was hard to tell. Even though many years had passed, they didn't look too dilapidated. Some were damaged and some were tattered, but it looked like they had experienced a war during the turmoil of war and were accidentally damaged. It didn't seem like they had been eroded by time. I can't tell when the buildings here were built at all. Even how long they had been here. Huge buildings, huge city, incredible antiquity, incredible style. It's like the residence of a god. We thought that this sentence was actually not wrong. He just did not know if the God in these people's hearts was a concept or a definite thing. The time span? Can't you tell? Hui whispered in his soul. I don't know if it's because of the rules or the big fragment itself. I can't feel the rules of time in this place. I can only judge that the rules of time are normal. Feng, take a look. It's about the same situation. I can calculate. Well, the time span is... Yin Nuoxing frowned and pulled her long hair. At least 4 eras. For eras? Hearing this long time, Hui crossed his arms and frowned. This thing can't be brought down from the 8 elements realm, right? If it was brought down from the 8 elements realm, it's normal that it can't see the rules of time clearly. It probably suffered a few heavy blows when it passed through the barrier of the 8 elements realm. Yin Nuoxing added, at least 4 eras. It's hard to say if the time span will not double or triple. Well, we looked around. Let's go to the side and look for something. They're too slow. We was about to shout when the blue-clothed young man turned to look at Lu Weiran. Uncle Lu, the feeling has dissipated a little. There shouldn't be any problem. Let's split up. This place is too big. We probably won't find anything if we stick together. Lu Weiran tilted her head. Are you sure there's no problem? Well, for the time being, there's no such feeling. The blue-clothed young man scratched his head and laughed dryly. How about this? Let's split up for a while and come back here in 1 or 2 hours. How about we gather at a place near the center? We'll leave some obvious road signs on the way, so that it won't be difficult to find people if we go to the wrong place. All right, then let's split up. However, we can't guarantee that we're completely safe now. It's best not to touch anything in the ancient city if it's not necessary. If there's anything worth paying attention to, just write it down first. I feel that everything here is worth paying attention to. Someone could not help but mutter. Everyone smiled bitterly. This was obviously a place that they were not familiar with. Naturally, they would be curious about everything. To ensure that they did not touch anything, it was not that easy. When everyone dispersed, and only a few of them were left, we let out a long sigh and said, Then, let's move. Since there's no one left, we can move freely. Feng, let's go to the tower and have a look. According to the time span that you mentioned just now, I have a rough guess. This place might be a part of the continent that was destroyed. It might have been preserved, not destroyed in the void. It should be the remnants of the destruction back then. It's not the main body that was directly destroyed by the void. That's why we can see the torn wounds at the edge. Hui pointed to a place in the distance. He waved his hand and walked away. Anyway, let's go and take a look first. Just as he took 2 steps, a weak voice suddenly sounded, That do you know this place? Huey's footsteps stopped abruptly. Yin Nuoxing was also stunned for half a second. She turned around and saw Zhou Zibai, the little girl, weakly raising her little hand and looking at them. Suddenly, they were stunned. They forgot that there was a little tail following them. Ahem. Hui coughed dryly. Suddenly, he quickly approached Zhou Zibai. He stared at her and pretended to be fierce. Little girl, you didn't hear anything. You didn't see anything. Do you understand? Yin Nuoxing pushed Hui to the side. She helplessly shook her head at the frightened Zhou Zibai. It's just his daily whimsy. Don't worry about him. Anyway, there's only one person. I don't think it matters. The last sentence was said to Hui and the little girl. When the two saw that the person in charge also said that there was no problem, they naturally stopped talking. Let's go. Hui waved his hand. He turned into a white shadow and flew directly into the sky. He flew toward the huge tower in the center. Yin Nuoxing held Zhou Zibai with one hand and also turned into a shadow to follow. With their speed, it only took a few minutes to reach the highest tower in the city. To be honest, it was obviously complicated to explain the origin of the three of them, the starry sky, the world, the void, and other things to Zhou Zibai, an ordinary person who lived in the mortal world. Although she had seen a lot of incomprehensible things at this moment, her worldview was in a state of shaky state. It should collapse and be reconstructed quickly with a poke of a finger. At this time, her ability to understand should be raised to an unimaginable level. Basically, this little girl would accept whatever they said calmly, But how could he accurately explain these guys who were extremely dangerous in the world of Order of the Eight Elements realm? Especially these three guys who had been freeloading on food, drinks, and lodging these days. We felt that this thing was really too difficult to understand. In fact, it didn't matter if he didn't explain. She was immortal, right? Her lifespan was fixed. She couldn't live for more than 1,000 years. Besides, the three of them patted their backs and returned to the Eight Elements realm. There was probably nothing to say. They would never see each other again in this life. So, sigh. In fact, he didn't want to keep others in suspense. Of course, he might not say anything. Fly, fly, fly. On the tens of thousands of feet high tower, Zhou Zibai looked down at the ground that was almost invisible from the edge of the tower. She repeated a sentence with a dull expression. Yin Nuoxing was about to put the little girl down. She suddenly rushed up and hugged half of his body. Don't let go of me. My legs are weak. Yin Nuoxing, isn't it just flying tens of thousands of meters high? Aye. People are afraid of heights. No, I'm not afraid of heights. It's just that I haven't reached my limit. That's all. Zhou Zibai trembled as she hugged Yin Nuoxing. Her pretty face was pale. Fly. When she looked back at the ground again, she almost fainted. It's strange. You weren't that scared when you were on the plane and standing on the platform. That's different. Zhou Zibai was about to cry. Yin Nuoxing scratched his cheek. Well, I forgot that you are an ordinary person. He continued to hug the little girl, turned his head, and followed Hui and Yin Nuoxing into the tower. In the dark space of the tower, only the light of the stars shone through the entrance and the hole in the ceiling. The light illuminated the empty space of the tower. There were many energy runes engraved on the walls of the tower. They were obviously activated by energy. There should be something in this empty space, but it needed energy. That's right. This is the tower in that continent. I forgot the name. It's the energy center of a city. It was used to resist the power of chaos at that time. It contains a very basic power of order. It was a weak power of order that was instinctively created at that time. After all, not everyone came into contact with order and chaos at that time. The power of order, well, it should be the last to recover. We looked at the spacious space and couldn't help but sigh. Yin Nuoxing looked around. Is it left behind from that time? Although I can't be 100% sure, my intuition tells me that this is the case. I've been here before and even used this tower, so I remember it very clearly. The difficulty of making this thing was quite high at that time, although it can't be compared to our Origin Energy Tower in any way. Hui nodded. As he spoke, he frowned and looked distressed. Now the most difficult thing is, I don't know why it appeared here. If it was brought down by someone, where's the person? Were his last words? He can't deliberately throw this piece of trash into someone else's house and then ignore it, right? Yin Nuoxing could only remain silent. He really didn't know anything. The only thing he could do now was to ask, do you want to use the Book of Epics to take a look? Well, with the degree of the remnant rules, your Book of Epics might not be able to figure it out. Hui shrugged. I have a guess. The little girl looked up at Hui. Could this be the main body that was swept into the void? It could be part of it. Hui was startled. They were swept into the void. The power of chaos mixed with the void and exploded, opening up a passageway across the primordial realm. The parts that didn't dissipate in time were sent here. There were also some people who stayed on that continent and eventually came here together. The little girl spread out her hands. They're all rebirth state level creations mixed with order and power of chaos. Although it's very weak, it's enough for the void to gnaw on for a while. It won't dissipate so easily. That's a possibility. Yin Nuoxing nodded. As Hui listened, sweat dripped down his forehead. His mouth trembled as he opened it. But if that's the case, then the power of chaos, didn't it also come to the third primordial realm? Yin Nuoxing and the little girl were startled at the same time. Hui continued to speak in a trembling voice. His words were shocking to the extreme. And he stayed in the three elements realm for 9 eras. The little girl swallowed her saliva. Oh, the main body of the continent that exploded crossed over to the third primordial realm with the power of chaos. That was really an epic event. Chapter 1769. No, no, no. Although it's a very terrible thing to say, I was just scared. Think about it after calming down. No matter how unbelievable the chaotic energy was, it couldn't have stayed in the three elements realm safe and sound under the influence of the void, could it? That's right, Zhang Tai said with a deep voice. That's right. Hui waved his hand vigorously. Besides, this place is under the protection of the heavenly god of origin. We personally rebooted it. The protection of the heavenly god of origin hasn't been rebooted in the 47th era, right? The little girl said. That. Huey's expression froze again as sweat poured down like rain. Indeed, it hasn't, but it has been rebooted now. Well, if it really fell into the three elemental realm along with this fragment, it shouldn't be able to cause any trouble under the suppression of the heavenly god of origin's protection. After all, they are beings of the same level. Whether it can cause any trouble or not is one thing. Yin Nuoxing turned to look outside the tower. Whether it exists or not is another thing. No matter what, it shouldn't exist here, if it really is here. That's true. Hui let out a long sigh and scratched his head. What happened in the 47th era was really an old debt. At that time, he didn't have a deep understanding of order and chaos. Although he knew that the thing that fell into his neighbor's house wasn't anything good, he didn't expect it to be something so deadly. If nothing happened in those 4 eras, they would be fine. But if they didn't, then he didn't know what would happen. Let's look around here first. Anything we say now is just a guess. It's good to find some clues to comfort ourselves, but if not, Huey's cheeks twitched as he breathed a sigh of relief. We'll see when the time comes. Even though he was looking for clues, Hui himself wasn't sure if he was looking for clues to prove that this island had nothing to do with the continent that was swept away, or that this island was the destroyed continent or a fragment of the continent. 3 directions, 3 scenarios. Just thinking about it for a while was enough to give him a headache. It was really a headache for the 8 elemental realm. This damned chaos. They came to the 3 elemental realm for a vacation, but they still couldn't be at ease. We walked around for a while, then raised his hand and shouted, phone, come here. I found it. Yin Nuoxing pulled Zhou Ji by, who was still in a state of shock, and stopped in front of Hui. In front of the latter, there was a group of dozens of facets, and most of its overall structure was hollow. That is, only the skeleton outlined its general appearance. At the edge of this dozens of facets, there were 4.5-meter long horizontal bars, and the end of the horizontal bars was connected to a hollow ring. This big thing seemed to be some kind of rule creation, and it was placed in the air of this tower. It must be related to it. This is the core of this tower. Let me think, I've touched this thing before. Like this, like this, like this. Hui pressed his hands on the ring connected by the 2 horizontal bars, frowning and muttering. His soul flowed into the core along his hands, and a moment later, a ray of golden light flashed in his eyes. It's done. The energy surged in the tower, and the slight contact with the tower made a crisp echo. The sound was all restrained inside the tower, and it was still quiet outside. Then, the walls of the entire tower began to light up one by one from the bottom. Those were energy runes that had been hidden in the walls for countless years. At this moment, as the core of the tower was reactivated, they also woke up. It took 3 minutes for the energy runes to completely wake up. When the ceiling next to the big hole was also filled with energy runes, countless golden light slowly flowed out from each energy rune, floating in this space. The scattered energy particles illuminated the space here like a group of fireflies. They hovered in the air, touched each other, and then quickly condensed. Finally, they condensed into the shape of hundreds of stars around the core. There were dozens of stars near the center that were not golden, but 2 conspicuous white, which was deliberately marked. The appearance of this group of stars. The little girl stared at the golden starry sky that suddenly appeared, narrowing her eyes slightly as she recalled. After a moment, she clapped her hands. Isn't it the arrangement of the stars on the door? If that's the case, these white stars are the 61 constellations of the southern sky that you mentioned. Huey's face was a little stiff when he saw this thing appear. He only came back to his senses after hearing her exclamation. He scratched his head and laughed dryly at the three of them. Well, since this thing has appeared, it can't be wrong. That's right, this is indeed the tower on that continent, and it's the original one. It can't be added later. Other than this obvious mark, feel the power of order here, and you'll understand. Yin Nuashing listened and carefully sensed it. She nodded. The power of order is very thin, and it does look like the original power of order. It also fits the situation at that time that you mentioned. This thing was the continent in the 8 elements realm. Although we did not know what it had experienced all these years, he had seen with his own eyes that this continent was swept away by the power of chaos, tearing open a path in the void and rushing in. It collapsed, disintegrated, and exploded in the void without any warning. He thought that the power of chaos would dissipate with the entire continent, but unexpectedly, it did not completely dissipate. Instead, it remained because of its huge size. The exploded continent was accompanied by the power of chaos, and coincidentally crossed over to the 3 elements realm. Now, he was also a little troubled. There was a difference of 4 eras between the 47th era and the 51st era when the Origin God Protection was reactivated. These 4 eras were enough for this mass of power of chaos to stir up trouble in the 3 elements realm. This mass of power of chaos definitely originated from the chaotic concept body. Although he did not know why it was so lazy, it could not fool people. It could not hide its aura that wanted to collapse order wherever it went. But when he thought of this situation, he scratched his head anxiously. Damn, I don't want my backyard to be on fire during the final battle in the void. It's fine if my backyard is on fire, but it's the backyard of another element realm. Isn't that even worse? This is the power of the chaotic concept body. This is really 4 eras for whole eras. Why didn't you think of this back then? Stop scratching. Even if you scratch your head until you're bald, you can't hide the problem now. Yin Nuashing let out a long sigh of relief and shook her head helplessly. So what do we do now? We don't know if this thing is an incomplete part of the original body of the continent, or if it's just a large fragment that was torn off from the continent. Oh, forget it. Please don't let it be a fragment. I hope that this is the original body. If that's the case, we just have to give this original body to... Hui was suddenly startled. Phone, do you hear something? The little girl's ears twitched, and she turned to look outside. It seems to be a sound coming from outside. Ah, it sounded a little like the sound of fighting and killing. The expressions of the 3 changed abruptly, and they hurriedly rushed out of the tower. Standing at the edge of the tower, they looked down at the entire city, and then all of them drew in a breath of cold air. The huge city was originally silent, and it was still like that before they plunged into the tower. Everyone split up to explore the ruins of the civilization that they had never come into contact with before, and they were not too sure if they had triggered or encountered anything along the way. The only thing they were sure of was that they were in big trouble now. Black mist-like shadows emerged from the underground of the city in clusters, like a ball of water, like a ball of air that was constantly wriggling, releasing an extremely ominous aura in all directions. 2 clusters of dark mist that were close to each other would attract each other and gradually gather together. When it expanded to a certain extent, it would fall to the ground and turn into human-shaped soldiers wearing tattered armor and holding long spears. Soldiers of chaos. This thing was indeed the power of the concept of chaos. This soldiers of chaos, this aura, this thing's characteristics, there was no doubt about it. But the soldiers before them, oh, the power of chaos. The little girl could not help but exclaim, when did these things come out? Or have they been here from the beginning, and just waiting for all of us to come in before they're ready to catch us? Soldiers of chaos. Yin Nuashing murmured. They don't look the same, but that's not important. The nature is the same, but... Phone, do you feel that these soldiers of chaos seem to be much weaker than what we imagined? Hui frowned. There were so many of them in the city. Chaotic aura kept appearing in the south, north, west, and east of the city. They condensed into groups of chaos soldiers that were almost 2 meters tall. They ran toward the south of the city where they were. However, their aura, number, and size were far from the chaos soldiers that they knew. Soldiers of chaos were naturally formed in the south of the city. 12 to 20 soldiers of chaos would jump out of a cluster of dark mist, and when they encountered the group, they would immediately pick up their weapons and attack. But these things that were extremely ferocious and represented the basic power of the Void of Chaos were actually killed by Liu Weiron's palm strike. Is this a pirated version or a shrunken version? The protection of the heavenly god of origins. Yin Nuoxing reacted after a short while. She tilted her head and looked at the two of them. The protection of the heavenly god of origins suppresses the power of chaos. Feel it carefully. Their power is entangled by the power of origin, and they can't fully exert it. We looked at it for a while and said, so that's how it is. I was wondering why it was more, Screams came from below. They did not know which unlucky family was too deep in the city center, so they were surrounded by soldiers of chaos that rushed out from all directions. There were about 1,000 soldiers of chaos there, and if they all pounced on them, they could bury the 5 of them alive. In a vast area of the city, there were probably tens of millions of soldiers of chaos that had taken shape, and they were marching towards the south of the city. Tens of millions of soldiers ran on the ground and flipped over the houses. The chaotic sound of footsteps mixed with all kinds of screams and cries of ghosts. In addition, the dark mist spread into an ocean or condensed into a column of smoke that hovered in midair, as if dark flames were burning the earth. It was like a picture engraved in hell. Zhou Zibai felt a little uneasy just by looking at it, and her face turned pale. This kind of scene was too shocking for a little girl like her. But after all, it's still that kind of thing. Let's get rid of it as soon as possible. Hui waved his hand and looked down at the battlefield. He nodded and said, Feng, you go and save the few people below. This girl, and I will go to the other side. Anyway, let's gather the people first. Even if they can deal with these soldiers of chaos that have been weakened countless times, they can't deal with too many of them. If they don't gather, they will be wiped out. Hui left these words and ran to the other 2 places with the little girl to save the people. Yin Nuoxing jumped on the spot for a while. He turned his head and saw Zhou Zibai looking at the ghostly scene below. His pretty face was a little pale. He reminded her softly, We're going down. Are you ready? Zhou Zibai looked at him with trembling eyes and whispered, That were those things. Why do I feel uneasy just by looking at them? It's like facing death directly. That's right, just by looking at them, there was no sense of oppression from facing a strong enemy. But as long as she faced them directly, she would unconditionally experience the feeling of death. A completely unreasonable fear instantly flooded his mind. Those things. Yin Nuoxing stretched his hands and pulled Zhou Zibai into his arms. He said calmly, Those are just a pile of mud. If you feel uneasy and scared, just put your emotions and thoughts somewhere else. To you, this level is just a threat for now. Although I don't quite understand, I think it's already very scary. Zhou Zibai smiled bitterly. Looking at the scene of gray clouds and mist all over the city, she felt a little dizzy just thinking about it. She could not help but grab his shoulders with both hands. The value of this thing's existence is to disrupt all of our plans and make people upset. Every time it appears, the living people within a radius of 1,000,000 miles will become irritable. Yin Nuoxing leaped, and the feeling of weightlessness suddenly fell on Zhou Zibai. Even though she had been in the sky and on the ground several times, she still could not stand the feeling of falling tens of thousands of meters. The little girl was so scared that her face turned pale. Order descending from the heavens. Leaping from tens of thousands of meters in the air, he slammed his fist on the ground with an extremely violent force. It was like a meteorite falling directly to the ground. The mighty shock wave overturned the ground within a radius of 2 to 3 kilometers. The ground bounced up like a seesaw. Huge pieces of the ground flew into the sky together with tens of thousands of soldiers of chaos, and then fell into the cracks that were several meters wide. The soldiers of chaos who were still standing on the ground were blown away by the shockwave. They fell into a pile, like a human pyramid. The light armor and weapons on their bodies all collided with each other, and the crackling sound was endless. By the way, the commotion caused by the falling meteorite had already flipped over all the houses within a radius of 3 to 4,000 meters. At this moment, there were no obstacles at all. Only a few sturdy houses still had their foundations left. The group of people who were besieged suddenly realized that the dark shadow monsters had all disappeared. They quickly reorganized their team and looked around in confusion. They were in the area that was flattened by the shockwave, but for some reason, the area 10 meters around them was intact. The ground was even flat. Then, they saw Yun Nuashing walking out of the center of the crater, and their expressions changed. You are that. They were slightly surprised. Who was this person? They only knew that this person could recognize the ancient marks of Tao. Let's not talk nonsense. Yin Nuashing hugged Zhou Zibai, who was about to faint, tightly with one hand. She turned her face to the side and shook her head. Come with me. Let's get out of here. After saying that, she did not care whether the 5 people heard her or not. She walked straight to the south of the city. The former and the others quickly put down the countless doubts in their hearts and followed her. They did not want to be surrounded by a group of monsters that emerged from the ground again. Zhou Zibai woke up in a daze. She felt that she was moving quickly. She slowly opened her eyes. As soon as she opened her eyes, she saw a dark shadow that was emitting dark clouds. She felt that she was going to die in an instant. She was so scared that her heart suddenly shrank. She fainted again before she could catch her breath. Why does this girl faint so easily? Yin Nuashing frowned and punched the chaos soldier that rushed toward her. The latter rushed out like a bowling ball and knocked dozens of chaos soldiers on the street together. They smashed into the houses and were buried under the debris. The 5 people who followed her could not help but smile bitterly. Even they felt that they could not protect their lives when they saw the shadow monster, let alone such a young girl. Being in the ruins, in the shadows of countless buildings, houses, and towers, and dancing with countless monsters, the clanging of armor and weapons could be heard from all directions, as well as the unknown sounds made by the monsters. They could not help but have the illusion that they were surrounded by these monsters, and even their footsteps slowed down a little because of this. Start running. Do you want to die if you stop here? Sensing the condition of the few people, Yin Nuashing stomped on the ground and stopped moving forward. She turned around and looked at the few people who were confused and muddle-headed. She stomped on the ground and unleashed her spiritual power. Wake up! The deafening sound in their ears contained the impact of the spiritual power. The 5 people who were in a daze were slapped hard in the face. Their faces instantly turned pale, but their confused and empty eyes instantly regained their spirit. Oh no! The few of them took a few deep breaths and shook their heads in confusion. Why do we lose our minds so easily? What's going on? I feel like my mind is about to be swallowed by those monsters when I'm just a short distance away. Yin Nuashing shook her head. The power of chaos was, after all, the power of chaos. Even if it was suppressed by the protection of the heavenly god of origin, it was still one of the most terrifying powers in the greater Yuan realm. It was the natural enemy of order. This was the situation that she was worried about. Even if the power was suppressed by the protection of the heavenly god of origin, it could still affect the lives in the lower Yuan realm with its own characteristics. Just like the situation before them, the soldiers of chaos had only gathered together. The many characteristics of the power of chaos had not really erupted, but they could already not withstand the influence of this aura. Don't think about those things. Don't establish the idea that they are terrifying in your heart. The more you care, the more terrifying they are. You can't defeat them. Your fragile mind will fall faster. Yin Nuashing lifted Zhou Zibai up a few times and waved her hand. If you can't do it, then don't think about anything. Or think of something else to divert your attention. Just run. You don't have to fight the enemy. The few of them laughed bitterly. It was really not a matter of whether they wanted to or not. After these things came out, their minds were like a what? They could not control it at any time and place. "Little sister, over here, come over quickly." A loud shout penetrated the gray clouds and the barriers of the heavy buildings. Yin Nuashing and the others turned their heads and saw a soldier of chaos soaring into the sky. He was sent flying by a punch. 100 meters away, a figure in blue jumped up and waved at them from a few meters high. When he landed, he even smashed the soldiers of chaos on the ground into pieces. "We're here. We're just waiting for you." The young man in blue cleared the soldiers of chaos on the street. After receiving Yin Nuashing and the others, he heaved a long sigh of relief. But when he saw Zhou Zibai fainted, he was still shocked. He quickly asked, "Are you hurt?" "No, just scared." Yin Nuashing shook her head and looked at the young man in blue. "How's the situation now?" "Now." As soon as the young man in blue said that, the buildings not far away suddenly collapsed with a bang. Soon, it became a ruin. Then the surrounding buildings also collapsed one by one. It became an empty flat ground. Lu Weiran and the others came out of the ruins. When they saw Yin Nuashing, they were a little happy. "I was just about to send someone to look for you. Everyone is here. There's nothing else to say. We don't know what happened. Fortunately, no one is dead yet," Lu Weiran said softly. They had returned to the south of the city near the gate. Behind them was the city gate and the city wall. In front of them was an empty flat ground. There were only a few ruins in front of them. "What the hell is going on?" "I don't know. Don't ask me. I don't think anyone knows." Lu Weiran, "What do you think we should do now?" Everyone gathered together and looked a little embarrassed. They were caught off guard by the soldiers of chaos that suddenly appeared. Some of them were injured. Fortunately, they were not entangled by the forces of chaos. It was just an ordinary injury. With their strength, they could easily deal with it. "What should we do?" Lu Weiran looked at everyone and said, "What can we do? We'll deal with whatever comes our way." I just took a look. Those shadow-like things are very aggressive. Although they are weak, there are a lot of them. With the number of people we have, we'll probably be drowned before we can even make a sound. The chaotic noises coming from afar suddenly calmed down a lot. Those chaotic noises that sounded like tens of thousands of people running around gradually calmed down. What replaced it was a series of deep, uniform, heavy footsteps that made everyone's hearts tremble. Trembling, they turned their heads. What came into view was a dark gray formation. A vast and mighty phalanx slowly approached from a distance of hundreds of meters away. The uniform pikes and uniform sounds were like that of a well-trained army. Even Lu Weiran, who had fought on the battlefield before, had a change in expression. This kind of ancient phalanx of soldiers had a much stronger impact than the current war. Just the sight of the soaring blood aura in front of her eyes was enough to make one's heart and soul split. It was so neat. It would be great if there was a cannon. You see, a cannon would definitely kill them all. Lu Weiran thought seriously. "Oh my God, Uncle Lu, I'm not married yet." The blue-robed youth's jaw almost dislocated. "I'm afraid there are tens of thousands. No, hundreds of thousands? This foul atmosphere. Uncle Lu, don't tell me you're going to order everyone to use bayonets?" "I hope so." Everyone swallowed their saliva with difficulty. Their battle consciousness made them get into position and take out their weapons. However, their tightly clenched hands trembled slightly, and they slowly put them down. Their faces were full of bitterness. This was different from the battles they had experienced in the past. Yin Nuashing and Hui glanced at each other. The former gestured more than 30 million with his eyes, while the latter nodded excitedly. The little girl reached out and patted the two of them. She rolled her eyes and said, "What should we do? What should we do?" The two of them turned to look at her and then looked forward. They said in unison, "Order and chaos are colliding. What else can we do? Fight to the death." Chapter 1770. Based on their current knowledge and experience, they were no longer in the era of cold weapons where knives, spears, swords, halberds, hatchets, hooks, and forks were used one after another. Wars were fought with cannons, planes, and missiles. For those with a bit of cultural heritage, it was extremely rare for them to find a sword that had been passed down from their ancestors. Even if they had some history, they might only find a rusty old gun. Of course, not all of them had been on the battlefield, but more than half of them had either seen or experienced it. They were not ordinary people, and none of them were mentally weak. However, just now, their psychological defenses were broken by the enemy's shout, and they were shocked by the uniform phalanx formation. The scene in front of them was indeed more shocking than the current battlefield. It was a shock caused by the accumulation of numbers. If only they had a cannon. Everyone thought from the bottom of their hearts. It was too neat, so neat that they wanted to fire a cannon at them. Unfortunately, they didn't have one. Speaking of the phalanx formation in front of them, the layout of the ancient phalanx formation. No. They recalled the cold weapons during the evolution of human beings. It was the 18 types of weapons. They were not normal people. If they fought barehanded, they would have no problem fighting 10, 20, or even dozens of people. Even if they suddenly took out a gun and said, "Sir, the times have changed," it would not be so easy to cause harm to them. To put it bluntly, they were a group of super soldiers. Usually, they fought barehanded, using their jinshi, spiritual energy, and internal strength. They would definitely be able to hold up in small situations, and they looked very powerful. However, that was only for small situations. When the enemy opened up an entire phalanx formation in front of them with spears and spears, they suddenly fell silent. 100 people against hundreds of thousands of monsters in light and heavy armor, spears, and shields. Well, they were facing an army, and they were not normal people. On the other hand, they were facing a team, and they were not normal people either. It was obvious who had the upper hand. The team was in a state of dead silence. Everyone was absent-minded because of the huge momentum. After Lu Weiran and the others recovered from the shock, they stood at the forefront of the team under the urging of their duty. Influenced by them, the people who recovered from the shock also took a few steps forward and took a deep breath. "So, are we not running?" Someone asked Lu Weiran. "Where are you going?" "Behind us is a mountainous region, a mountain range, and further back is the edge of the floating island. Our retreat is already cut off. Moreover, our speed is not even as fast as their marching speed." Lu Weiran pondered for a moment, then shook her head helplessly. "If we could run, we would have done so long ago." Everyone laughed bitterly. Someone couldn't help but say, "I never thought that I would die in the secret realm. I've always wanted to sacrifice my life for the country." Unfortunately, I didn't think about it either. But from the looks of it, unless there's a miracle. Unfortunately, I don't believe in miracles. The blue-clothed young man couldn't help but smile bitterly when he heard everyone's words. That's too pessimistic, but it made sense. From what they could see, there were at least 1,000,000 square formations. At that moment, they were still slowly approaching them. Dark gray clouds spread out. It seemed to be some sort of energy that made them feel disgusted. Just by looking at it, they felt as if they were being devoured. He suddenly thought of something and turned to look at Yin Nuoxing and the others. "Is it still 30 million now?" "About 40 million. If we wait a little longer, it might be 55 million, then 70 million, then 100 million, 200 million, 400 million. This thing's wholesale speed will only get faster and faster. The shelter has suppressed everything, except for this. What do you think?" "There's nothing to say. They're suppressed, but we're not. The situation is clear." Yin Nuoxing put down Zhou Zibai and helped the frightened little girl steady. Then, she began to stretch her arms. "It's just a matter of which direction to attack, and the extent of whether to unlock the seal." We thought for a moment. "I think it's better not to unlock it. With your strength, it would be light if you tore the entire world apart. It would take a bit of effort for us to repair it. In the end, the three of us would have to unlock the seal together." Then let's see how it goes. If I don't get stronger, there's no need to unlock the seal. With their current combat power, it's enough." Yin Nuoxing nodded and subconsciously wanted to take out the Netherworld Ruins sword. "But I still want to use Void Rise." "Stop. If you stab down with the sword, it's going to explode." We did 1, 2, 3 for stretches and even jogged twice on the spot. The blue-clothed young man silently turned his gaze back. Lu Weiran and the others who turned back to look at him were also a little silent. The three of them were relaxed, allowing them to recover from the shock of facing hundreds of thousands of enemies. Although they did not know why the three of them could still be so calm, they couldn't be forcing themselves to stay alert, right? Lu Weiran sighed inwardly. In this situation, even if three mortal immortals came, they might not be able to turn the tide, let alone three heavenly realm experts. The experts in the ancient times were said to be able to fight thousands of soldiers alone. One person was comparable to 10,000 soldiers. Fortunately, there were hundreds of thousands of inhuman creatures in front of them. This scene would make even mortal immortals pee their pants. I have to concentrate now. The blue-clothed young man patted his cheeks, took a deep breath, and refocused his attention. He stared at the hundreds of thousands of enemies in the distance, which were already 100 or 200 meters away. No, by the looks of it, there were probably millions of them. Kid, you'll follow us later and guard the flanks. Leave the front to us. Lu Weiran breathed a sigh of relief. She turned around and shouted at the others. Show some strength. Don't let this group of ancient people look down on us. Uncle Lu, we don't have guns or cannons and can only fight with our fists and feet. We're not that far off from them. At least they have swords, spears, swords, and halberds. More than half of us are empty-handed. The blue-clothed young man's cheeks twitched. Everyone, this guy really ruined the atmosphere. They're going to charge. Lu Weiran shouted, and everyone entered the most serious state of concentration. The dense formation suddenly vibrated in the next second. Countless shadow monsters charged at them like a tide. The long spears pointed at the sky were all placed in front of them. The cold light made their skin feel hot, even though they were 100 meters away. The shadow monsters behind the second line began to scatter to the left and right. They accelerated their charge and formed a semicircle in front of them. Does anyone know what formation this is? It doesn't matter what formation it is. You just need to know that there are hundreds of thousands and millions of them on the other side, while we only have 100 people. We can't break through any formation. If they swarm up and each of them stomps on us, it's basically over. The two 4C realm elders stepped forward. Blue electric arcs jumped in their hands. The power of thunder surged out of their bodies. Their bodies floated a foot above the ground because of the surging spirit energy. At the same time, the shadow monsters that surged like a tsunami had already rushed to within 10 meters of the formation. The chaotic aura released by the long spears and large swords made everyone break out in cold sweat. Lightning strike! The two elders shouted angrily. The blue thunderbolts wrapped around their hands, fiercely pressed against the ground. A pattern drawn with the power of thunder suddenly bloomed on the ground. Countless blue thunderbolts rushed out in all directions like a dense net. The loud noise that sounded like the sky was falling and the earth was cracking. The thunderbolts that could be seen with the naked eye raged on the ground, drawing countless deep and fragmented scars. The power of the thunderbolts pierced through thousands of shadow monsters in the nearest range, directly turning them into chaotic aura in the air. The power of thunder lasted for a short 2 seconds. It made the air scorching hot. The lingering smoke that had just formed was broken through by the dark clouds. Everyone was shocked. 50 meters away, the dark tide maintained its momentum and continued to charge at them. It was as if the attack just now did not affect them at all. This is the power of numbers. The blue-clothed youth shouted. The shadow of a fierce tiger had just condensed on his body. Just as he was about to receive this wave of attack, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him faster than him. But it's only the number. Like a golden shadow, Hui appeared in front of the team, floating in midair. The long hair on his back kept dancing with the dark aura in front of him. Huey's body was surrounded by rolling golden aura. Looking at the chaotic wave that was surging toward him, he shouted softly, "Tremble." The shock wave that could be seen with the naked eye cracked the ground in front of them into hundreds of pieces. The overlapping 4 or 5 shock waves rolled the chaotic wave that was charging toward them from the front. The chaotic soldiers that were charging at the front were rolled up hundreds of meters into the air one after another, like a wall rising from the ground in front of them. Before they could turn into raindrops and fall down, the second shock wave came unexpectedly and shook them into chaotic aura and dissipated. The vibrating energy shock wave swept out only 1,000 meters away, and the space in front of them was already empty. Everyone who had been accumulating power for a long time was shocked. It was the first time they saw the power of this strange guy in action. It was more ridiculous than they thought. But no matter what, the stronger the combat power, the better, as expected of a powerhouse above the heavenly realm. Lu Weiran could not help but murmur, "Phone!" Hui turned around and shouted, making the people who thought he was going to chase after the victory startled, and they all turned their heads to look behind. There, Yin Nuoxing was holding a big, colorful sword. The 2-meter-long sword was as heavy as a door plank, with both hands tightly holding the sword hilt. The tip of the sword pointed to the sky. Hearing his shout, he slowly opened his eyes. That pair of colorful eyes made everyone's expression slightly tremble. The person in front of them felt a little blurry. It seemed that they couldn't see clearly. Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath and stomped hard on the ground with both feet. Her figure drew an arc in front of her and suddenly fell from a height of more than 10 meters. She held the big sword in her right hand and spun in the sky, as if she was accumulating power. As her body fell, it smashed hard on the ground. A scream suddenly sounded. Sky splitter. Dozens of energy sword auras drew a fan shape with him as the center and spread out 180 degrees in front of him. They quickly expanded to several meters, several tens of meters, and several hundreds of meters wide. The mighty energy sword auras swallowed everything in front of them and slowly disappeared thousands of meters away. Wherever they passed, even the ground was flattened. Much of the dark clouds dissipated. The young man in blue, after lying down for a long time, he could not utter the following words. With just one attack, tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of shadowy monsters disappeared into nothingness. Everyone was so scared that they couldn't even hold their weapons properly. Yes, they were scared. Although it was better to have more friendly firepower, this attack had completely broken the upper limit of their expectations. At this moment, they were so stunned that they couldn't react at all. Void domain. Gray-blue energy gushed out of the little girl's body and quickly condensed into a circular domain that covered more than 100 meters on the ground. Everyone standing in the domain saw themselves being enveloped by a grayish-blue light. Moreover, their confidence suddenly skyrocketed. When they looked at the shadow monsters in front of them, they felt that they were completely fearless. Hurry up! The domain's time is limited. Destroy them now. The little girl waved her hand and shouted softly. Everyone who was distracted suddenly came back to their senses and rushed forward while shouting. Comrades, charge together with me. Hui shouted. He, who was used to being the commander and walking in front, took the lead and rushed forward. His body, which was surrounded by golden energy, was like a hard shield. He rushed into the enemy's formation, and the swords, spears, swords, and halberds hit his body and made clanging sounds. No, it was simply him hitting the enemy's weapons. Not only was he completely unharmed, but the strength of the recoil was also dozens of times stronger, sending the surrounding enemies into the air and sending them dozens of meters away. They hovered in the air and turned into chaotic aura and dissipated. I won't fall behind too much, the blue-clothed young man shouted. He rushed into the enemy's formation like a human-shaped dragon. His hands and fists evolved into a fierce tiger, which then turned into a fierce bird. He opened and closed wide, killing in all directions. He was like a meat grinder, strangling and harvesting all the shadow monsters that were within 3 meters of him. Lu Weiran and the rest of the Alliance members were also using all sorts of methods to kill the enemies on the battlefield. However, as they fought, they realized that it was not easy to use them in a group. After exchanging glances, they quickly divided the 100 people into 10 teams, trying their best to maximize the effect of their domain. Although the killing speed of a group of people was not as fast as the two fellows who were clearly human, it was still shocking enough. The two old men were like they had been injected with chicken blood and could not stop releasing lightning strikes. The area looked as if it had been struck by a thunderstorm. Dozens of thunderbolts crackled in a second, and the people on the Alliance's side were scared witless and did not dare to go near it. What kind of skill is this domain? Is it a move of the ancient strong? The blue-clothed young man still had time to turn back and shout, "I feel like I can fight 10 dragons now." The little girl rolled her eyes and said, "Work harder, fight faster, just fight. There is no damage and no consumption in the domain. As long as you fight hard enough and fast enough, the enemy will not be able to get close to you. There is no time limit." Well, although the domain was used to support the two guys, of course, it would not be a problem to use it to support the Yuanshu realm. However, the effect of supporting the Yuanshu realm was not so exaggerated. It was because the group of people in the domain were all mortals that it could achieve such a level of no damage and no consumption. It was purely because their recovery speed was much faster than before, and they would not be overdrawn. Thunderstrike, 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 Firestrike, Firestrike, Water, Firestrike. The blue-clothed young man tilted his head and looked at the two old men who were rioting with all kinds of energy. The energy was rioting over there, as if there was a thundercloud specially aimed at that place. He suddenly felt that the little girl was right. The two old men were panting after touching 3 or 4 thunderstrikes last time. Now, they were as fierce as if they had eaten a dragon alive. In short, they were very fierce. One thunderstrike gave them the momentum of a thunderbolt. The battlefield was more violent than they had imagined. At this moment, they could feel the brutality and bloodiness of ancient marching formations. It was a trace that had long been covered by civilization. The slaughter on the battlefield had been replaced by distant images and numbers. It was rare to see such a close-range battle for a long time. There were faceless, shadowy monsters in all directions. A large group of 2-meter-tall monsters slashed at them from all directions with normal or strange weapons. Their initial burst of momentum was gradually suppressed by the enemy's numbers. Everywhere they looked, they could only see a dense and endless stream of enemies. Wherever their consciousness touched, they could only feel the flashes of swords and sabers that were filled with murderous intent and destructive will. Although there was no damage and no consumption in the domain, the blue-clothed young man had experienced that feeling himself. He was as invincible as a king descending to the world. It was a lie. Injuries to the body could be healed almost immediately, but there would be pain. The strength in the body would never be used up, but the arms that waved would be sore, and the hands that held the weapons would be sore. They would also be tired, their minds would be numb, and their reactions would be slow. It was a shackle that this body could not get rid of. Soldiers of chaos, soldiers of chaos. We let out a long sigh and looked back at the exhausted people who had been fighting for half an hour. He couldn't help but shake his head. After all, it's just a mortal body. How can it continue to fight with this group of emotionless things for so long? As mortals, it was already very impressive to be able to fight with the forces of chaos for half an hour, even though they had a lot of buffs on them. Maple, they won't be able to hold on for much longer. We might have to wipe out these forces before the chaos forces come up with something even more powerful, we said to Maple through his soul as he looked at him on the other side of the battlefield. Yin Wuxing looked back at Zhou Zibai and the rest, and then looked around. With the help of the 3 of them, the battle with the huge disparity in numbers had been in a stalemate. They did not really go all out. They were afraid of collapsing the world. The soldiers of chaos could not unleash their full power. Even so, they would not get tired. At least, they would not get tired easily. But the small group of order warriors behind them were almost at their limit. That being said, Lu Weiran, the young man in blue, and the rest who had been fighting head-on were not willing to retreat, even though they were already slightly tired. They were probably thinking, anyway, they could recover infinitely. At most, they would take a stab or 2 and feel the pain. They also knew that those cold weapons could easily tear them into pieces. At this moment, they were just holding on with a strong mentality. If this goes on, they may not be able to take it. Yin Nuoxing sighed. Her hand that was holding the sword trembled slightly. Her face of energy surged quickly, and the sword turned into a longbow. The energy of pulling the bowstring converged into an energy arrow. With a sonic boom, the arrow rushed into the depths of the formation of the soldiers of chaos. The mighty energy turned into a ball of energy that swept across the surrounding 10,000 meters, swallowing the surrounding space and energy. The soldiers of chaos were just blown up and torn into pieces by the strong wind. Bang, 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 bang. The afterimages of the continuous pulling of the bow quickly formed. 5 arrows suddenly rushed forward in less than half a second, opening up black holes that devoured and destroyed everything on the ground. Hui looked at the situation around him and scratched his head in distress. He gritted his teeth and released the energy in his body. Feng, I'll hold down the rules here. Release it gently. What's the situation now? After releasing the 5 arrows, Yin Nuoxing tilted her head and asked, What's the situation now? It's okay. You can use a little more force. Just a little more. Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes hard. What kind of little more is a little more? A little more is just shooting a few more arrows. It doesn't feel like the effect is particularly big. She thought about it and continued to raise her hand to pull the bowstring. But this time, the world suddenly trembled. Waves of energy condensed into a storm and swept across the space from a distance, converging toward where she was. Everyone felt this movement, and their hearts skipped a beat. They turned around and looked at her who was in the center. They could not help but feel that a storm was gathering. Hey, you! Hui was so scared that he spat out his tongue. He quickly summoned the guardian shield and slapped the shield into the ground. The power of the rules spread to the conceptual layer of space and rules. She pulled the bow and arrows. Dozens of energy arrows burst out with endless sonic booms. The ground around the void domain exploded with gorgeous fireworks. The pressure on everyone was suddenly reduced. They all had time to shake their hands and legs to recover. Then they raised their heads. In the center of the storm, he slowly emitted a colorful energy luster. This movement is a little big. The little girl also knew what the next scene would be. She quickly adjusted the void domain and covered everyone with layers of energy barriers condensed by the void energy. Energy balls that swallowed energy and chaos soldiers in all directions kept expanding on the ground, spreading violent energy. Yin Nuoxing had already put down her hands that were holding the bow. She closed her eyes and swayed gently in the wind. The longbow that was formed by energy in her hand slowly turned into a big sword. As she slowly raised her hand, the tip of the sword pointed to the ground. You. Take it easy. Take it easy. We saw him raise his hand, and his heart trembled fiercely. He hurriedly brought his shield back to the void domain and covered everyone with a more powerful energy barrier. As soon as he turned his head, he saw Maple suddenly open his eyes. The movement that was like the gathering of a storm had stopped. A burst of energy that had been brewing to the extreme was surging out of his body. Hui turned around and waved at everyone. Get down, get down, get down. Fall into the void. Yin Nuoxing shouted and stabbed the energy sword into the ground. The energy that was gathered in her body had already reached the critical point. At this moment, she was about to burst out. Void, boundless chaos. Everyone only had time to feel an unimaginably violent storm fiercely pulling at their faces. The whole world fell into darkness. Chapter 1771. Perhaps it was because he was lying on the ground, but the feeling of the earthquake was even clearer and more intense. It was as if a meteor shower had landed 100 meters in front of him. That shocking movement was indescribable. It was earth-shattering. Everything seemed to be unable to calm down. The roaring sound faded from the front and turned into waves of sound waves that lingered in the open field. Yes, the field. The seemingly high and sturdy city wall behind him had turned into powder and disappeared. Behind him was an endless mountain and field. When everything trembled and wanted to return to calm, the blue-clothed young man raised his head shakily and murmured to Lu Weiran, who was also dizzy beside him, "Uncle Lu, am I still alive? Some people are alive, but it may just be a residual illusion. Some people are dead, and there may not even be a trace of them left." Lu Weiran bent her waist and stood up. She looked around and couldn't help but sigh. This field is really spacious. This starry sky is really clean. Thousands of stars are twinkling. The river of stars is flowing, and the dark clouds have dissipated completely. When will I be able to see such a clear sky when I raise my head from my side? Hundreds of people did not suffer any substantial damage from the shaking of the earth. At most, they were a little dizzy from the shaking of the seesaw-like ground. At this moment, they were still a little unsteady or a little exhausted. The situation was still considered good, but there seemed to be two exceptions. Hui and the little girl were emitting white smoke. They stood in front of the crowd like two pillars, motionless. They were all stunned. When they were about to go forward to check the situation, Hui suddenly shivered and quickly shook his hands and body to shake off all the smoke and dust on his body. The little girl was also speechless as she patted her gray-blue dress and complained, "That's why it's very dangerous to be together with you guys. It's like betting our lives against the void, and we can't even monitor whether or not the probability has been secretly adjusted. His situation is more serious than before, right?" The indiscriminate attack almost broke the rules of the entire space. Hui smiled bitterly and shook his head. He was forced to do so at the front line. Feng obviously hasn't recovered from the endless battles at the front line. He didn't hold back at all. The little girl rolled her eyes and did not say anything else. She more or less knew about the battle at the front line of the void. Just as she said at the beginning, no one had it easy in the past 5 years. They were almost all beaten silly. Even after retreating from the front line to rest for a while, Feng Ling could not completely relax. His body was always ready to go on a rampage, and he would turn his attention to the slightest movement. If we had not kept him in check, the world would have turned into dust several times over. Then, he happened to gather a pile of chaos energy that had been pickled for 9 years. Like a dog that had been grounded for a few days, he was ecstatic the moment he was let out, and no one could pull him back. Of course, she did not say that the two of them were on a leash. Anyway, that was what she meant. She and Hui had joined hands to hold down the rules and stability of this space, but they almost failed to do so. When the infinite chaos exploded, this place was almost destroyed. Anyway, those unlucky chaos soldiers happened to be in a state of suppression, and they happened to meet the two of them. The outcome was already decided when they met. As the wind from the stars blew, the dust and thin energy clouds in front of him dispersed. Dozens of meters away, the figure wrapped in colorful light appeared. There was not a single soldier of chaos in sight. Even the ground was a little unstable. It was as if a few layers of the ground had been scraped off. Wide cracks could be seen everywhere, and some of them were still extending deeper into the ground. The laws of the structure seemed to have suffered a bit of an impact. Originally, the remaining chaos aura here could still act as a glue to forcefully stick them together. Now, the chaos aura has been cleansed clean. After being shaken by the weak origin energy, I'm afraid it's not very stable anymore. Hui whistled and kept looking around. Fortunately, this is the starry sky, and there's still some time before the structural rules completely collapse. Just in time, I found the core. Core? The little girl was stunned. What core? Probably the core where the chaos soldiers... No, the core where the chaos presence has gathered. Maybe it's temporary. It's where they were entrenched before. I feel that there's still a weak energy remaining there. It's best to go and take a look. Hui raised his finger and pointed into the distance. Looking around, it should be the center of the city. They only went to the tower next to it and did not visit the other buildings. Now, there was only a broken tower and a few other buildings that were already quite unstable. A few minutes later, everyone who slowly woke up was tidying up their messy appearance. They looked around with confused and blank eyes, and finally fixed their eyes on the three incredible people gathered together. "Little sister, are you hurt? Are you tired?" The young man in blue saw Yun Nuashing coming back, with a sleepy and lazy look on her pretty face. He rushed over and spoke with a flattering smile on his face, and did not hide his concern in his words. Yun Nuashing covered her mouth and yawned in response. Using the nihility infinite chaos in a self-sealed state was indeed not fun. In the last few seconds, she almost destroyed the seal. "All right, is everyone okay?" Seeing that she should be fine, the young man in blue nodded and looked around. Uncle Liu was reorganizing the people of the Alliance. As for the others, although they looked a little pale and a little dazed and not very energetic, there should not be too big of a problem. So he said to Hui, "Do you guys still want to go over?" Hui nodded and pointed to the city that had turned into a wasteland and pointed to the center. "That should be the center. We need to go and take a look and check if those things are, done. Does anyone still want to continue exploring?" The blue-clothed youth turned around and shouted. Hearing this, everyone shuddered and shook their heads vigorously. They had been boxing with countless shadow monsters for an hour. They had been injured and healed several times. Although they still had physical strength, they were mentally exhausted. Right now, they were almost unable to stand up. Moreover, God knows what they would see if they went further in. They did not want to see those ink-like shadow monsters rushing out again. That would really give them nightmares. "We won't go. If you guys still want to go forward, go ahead. We will rest here." Lu Weiran sat on the ground and let out a long breath. Looking at Yun Nuashing and the others, she showed a stiff smile. "To be honest, I thought we were done for today. I didn't expect you guys to be so powerful. I said it from the beginning, we are super brave." We gave a thumbs up and showed his shining white teeth. Then, he slightly restrained his expression and waved his hand. "You guys can rest here. The things inside will not be fun. Let's go, let's go." Lu Weiran waved her hand and urged, "Even if it is fun, I won't go. I don't want to see those damn things come out again after taking a few steps. I've decided, the next time I want to explore the secret realm, I will also bring a large group of fully armed people and an entire ammunition depot. I can't take this situation again." Everyone smiled bitterly. After this time, they would have an inexplicable fear of the secret realm and cave residents. "You guys still want to go?" Zhou Zhibai's pretty face was full of exhaustion. There was still lingering fear, and the fear had just subsided. In a trance, she seemed to be able to see the scene of the gray wave rushing towards her. In addition, she could also think of the scene of Yun Nuashing and the others sweeping the battlefield. No matter which one it was, it made her tremble. For an ordinary person who was busy in a passable city-level family not long ago, suddenly being thrown into the battlefield of war was too much of a shock. "Let's go and have a look." Yun Nuashing nodded. She stretched out her hand. After thinking for a while, she pressed on Zhou Zhibai's shoulder. "You just rest here. It will be done in a while. We're just going to take a look." Looking back, except for Yun Nuashing and the other two, there was only the blue-clothed young man walking towards the center of the city. When crossing the battlefield ruins, they could still feel the residual energy that had not completely subsided. The high energy and abnormal reactions coming from everywhere made the blue-clothed young man dizzy. Thinking that they were almost completely exposed, there was no need to hide anything anymore. He used the power of space to wrap the blue-clothed young man and walked forward together. Otherwise, he didn't know how long it would take for him to walk slowly. After dealing with these soldiers of chaos, the three of them felt even more uncomfortable. Their previous speculation was not completely over yet. Was this the wreckage of that continent? Or was it just a fragment of that continent? Since there was a fragment here, could it be that there might be more such fragments with the power of chaos lurking in the three elements realm? Then wouldn't it be, forget it. Let's check the core that remains here first. Maybe we can learn something. Feng, I suddenly have a bold guess. It was rare for Huey's mind to be active, and he put on a neurotic expression as he pinched his chin and pondered seriously. I don't think the incident in the 47th era was a coincidence. You mean that the power of that chaos concept body overturned its neighbors in the divine realm? You're saying that there is some other meaning behind it, right? Hui nodded vigorously, which made Yanuashing curious. Why? Why? There is no why. I am just guessing, calculating the problem here and the thoughts of those damn things in the void of chaos. Hui shrugged. When we were in the cloud continent, didn't we see a chaotic concept body? Well, a real clone. In short, it's a clone. I'm a little concerned about what it said from you. Hui stroked his chin and thought silently, muttering to himself, chaos will return to the world again. It is finally back, and what it did on the distant continent. Feng, it is the same as what I discussed with you before. The origin has passed away, and the void of chaos has fallen into silence. There is definitely an inevitable connection between the two. The void and the entire greater Yuan realm have reached the greatest compromise and temporary peace under this condition. The origin and the chaos concept body can no longer affect the world, and it is only temporary. What I want to say is that the chaos concept body seems to be using its own method to try to revive. Hui pinched his cheeks and continued to think. Didn't the clone we met in the graveyard of gods and demons say that it was killed by the origin god? Yin Nuashing tilted his head and looked at Hui, who was deep in thought. Then he nodded his head and said, Are you trying to say that the war in the 47th era, including the sudden sweep of the entire continent and the accidental arrival in the three-element sector, were all deliberately arranged by the concept body of chaos so that it could return to the world in the three-element sector? Yes. Yin Nuashing was silent. The possibility of such a conjecture was actually very high, and all sides had thought of it. Although there was the protection of the origin god, it was restored in the 51st era, and it did not exist in the 47th era. If Huey's conjecture was true, the chaos concept body had already made plans at that time. It made sense. However, later on, they were worried that the lower realm would be scourged by the underworld. So they reactivated the origin god's protection, and the chaos concept body might have been affected as well. Moreover, even with the origin god's protection, well, he could feel that he could break free of the protection if he really needed to. The protection set by the origin energy even included him in the range of the seal, and it was still suppressed by the origin energy. To put it bluntly, it was a higher level of self-sealing, and it could be broken free in an emergency. In that case, could it be hypothesized that the chaos concept body could also? After all, they were existences of the same level. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that this conjecture was very likely. Even if there was a day when the origin returned, it would probably be difficult to discover that a malignant tumor was slowly growing in the distant three elements realm and slowly recovering its strength. When the time came for it to break out of its cocoon in the three elements realm, the great Yuan realm would be in a bloodbath again. It can't be. Don't tell me we have to go to the three elements realm before settling the matter in the eight elements realm. It can't be that bad, right? Can we pretend that we didn't see it? Pretend that we didn't think of it. Let's sink this place and pretend that nothing happened. Hui suddenly pressed his head and smiled bitterly. Yin Nuashing and the little girl looked at him helplessly. He was the one who came up with the reason, and he was the one who proposed the matter. After it was done, this guy pressed his head and thought about it like an ostrich. Wishful thinking. If it was really as they thought, that the chaos void planned to be reborn in the three elements realm and had been itching for 9 years, or even longer, they might have to torment the three elements realm for a period of time. Even if they didn't do it themselves, they would have to send someone to do it. The wind in the starry sky rolled up the dust. Narrowing his eyes, the blue-clothed young man blinked and shook his head. He rubbed his eyes with his hands and looked straight ahead. They had already come to the center of the ruins. Not far from them was a tall tower like a landmark. Looking around, there seemed to be nothing else worth paying attention to. It's empty around. Is there really nothing left? What about the thing you just said you saw? The blue-clothed young man looked to Hui and the others. Hui stood in place with his hands on his waist and looked around. Suddenly, he raised his hand and pointed at the ground a few meters in front of him. There! Dig it up. It's right under there. Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes at this lazy guy. She waved her hand and rolled up a gust of wind, blowing the dust on the ground to the other side. The ground under their feet also gently shook for a while with this gust of wind. When the wind calmed down, the blue-clothed young man opened his eyes again. His expression suddenly froze. He seemed to, right in front of them was a pit that was more than 10 meters deep. This pit might have covered 100 meters around it, which meant that they were standing on top of the pit. Now that the dust at the bottom of the pit had cleared, they could see the true appearance of the pit. At the bottom of the pit, there was a light red energy cloak. Inside the cloak was a gray stone disc that was carved on the ground. In terms of style, the disc was very similar to the buildings around it. 2 octagonal stars were carved on it, and the empty space was filled with many mysterious patterns that looked very dense and mysterious. Oh, it's this thing. Hui pointed at the light red cover in front of him and walked forward. He stretched out his hand and gently opened the cover as if he was lifting a curtain. Other than the stone disc that was embedded in the ground, there was a light spot that was emitting a dark aura half a meter above the disc. Looking at it, it must be something from the chaos side. The core left behind by the chaos aura. Yin Nuashing narrowed her eyes. The original light and origin energy had begun to surge in her body. The chaos aura emitted by the light spot that was only the size of fist was not particularly strong. This was also the reason why she did not remove the seal as soon as she saw it. This thing, like the soldiers of chaos, was pressed on the ground by the protection of the heavenly god of origin. For the time being, it could not release the aura that could destroy the great Yuan realm. It seems that the chaos aura has been entrenched here for a very long time. It has been so long that it can produce changes on its own. Hui squatted on the ground and poked the solid disc. He touched his cheek and said, "We came here early. They have not changed to the extent that they can completely escape control. Anyway, Feng, you should get rid of that chaos aura first." Yin Nuashing's expression froze. She stared at him with her eyes wide open and said, "Please repeat that. All right, you're the only one who can deal with it, right? It's not possible to throw it into the void." The void of the tertiary realm does not have the ability to get rid of the power of the chaos concept body in a suppressed state. The only one who can deal with it is you. Hui smiled embarrassedly as he met Feng's gaze. He stammered, "It should be fine, right? Should be?" Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes and sneered. "This thing is the annihilation energy. As for the other annihilation energy, I already have one in my body. If I have another, anyway, you have 196 types of origin energy and 1 type of annihilation energy. Another annihilation energy will not break the balance." Yes, yes. Hui nodded vigorously. Yin Nuashing said, "What do you take me for? You're stuffing all the things you can't get rid of with me? A garbage incinerator? That's definitely not what you mean. It's just, all right, you shut up. I know." Yin Nuashing covered her face and let out a long sigh. She shook her head helplessly. The initial light and origin energy surged in her body and climbed up to her right hand. As she stretched out her palm, she grabbed the light spot that was emitting a gray aura. Under the suppressed state, the light spot was easily accepted by the initial light and turned into energy particles that fused with it. Hui swallowed his saliva when he saw this scene. Seeing that Feng did not move for a long time, he was about to say something when he suddenly saw the colorful luster on Feng's body fade away. The initial light also turned into a dark color. A gray energy emerged from the latter's body. The moment the aura that could collapse the grand primordial realm appeared, his expression stiffened. He hurriedly took out the guardian's shield. "Feng, how are you? Are you still awake? If you're still awake, squeak. Don't scare me." Yin Nuashing suddenly turned her head. Her gray eyes made Hui and the little girl's expressions turn sluggish. The self-sealing chains began to crack bit by bit. Why? You let me eat you. Now you're scared?" Yin Nuashing suddenly rolled her eyes. Both of them were stunned. This familiar tone. It seemed that the person was still the same person. They hurriedly let out a sigh of relief. "Isn't this?" Hui smiled bitterly. He carefully moved forward and reached out to poke her face. Every time you turn into the aura of the Order of Chaos, it's weird and scary. This new annihilation energy doesn't seem to be any different, but it seemed a little different. I can see it. Yun Nuashing, clench your hands. The annihilation energy is different from the origin energy. The origin energy can be divided into exactly 147 types. The 49 types that are weakened will not be discussed here. Each type can be said to be a situation in its own domain. The degree of similarity is not more than 30%. As for the annihilation energy, it seems that there are only 10 to 20% differences. But I only have 2 types of annihilation energy. The smallest even number of annihilation energies does not form a pattern. Yin Nuashing's face trembled as he spoke. Seeing that Huey's eyes were rolling around as if he was thinking about something, he said resolutely, "Don't even think about asking me to look for the annihilation energy. The origin energy is already enough for me to handle, and you still want me to touch the annihilation energy. Those damn things are obviously up to no good. What interested, live well, I feel that they are deliberately trying to get me to the other side. Nothing good is going to happen. This time is already a special situation, so there won't be a next time. There won't be a next time. I'm just thinking." Hui scratched his head and muttered softly, "You're not the only one who can touch this. I want to see if I can find any strange patterns through you to deal with the power of chaos. Even if I can't use it now, it could be a rehearsal for the future or something. All right, I won't say any more." Seeing Maple raise his hand, Hui quickly changed the topic and looked at the round plate on the ground. This round plate. I remember seeing it before, but I can't remember what it is used for. Maple, look at this. That is the control core of the area. Back then, when it was used to deal with that power, it was customized to divide the entire continent into battle areas. The voice did not come from any of the 3 of them. The 3 of them were stunned. They turned their heads together and saw the blue-robed youth smiling at them. His gaze fell on Hui. "Hello, guardian of the realm of the gods. It's been a long time." Hui was stunned for a moment. Yin Nuashing was also stunned. Immediately, her dull gray eyes turned into a colorful luster as she stared at the blue-robed youth. She suddenly understood and said, "I see, you are a reincarnated person." Chapter 1772. This was a very long story. Then let's keep it simple and focus on the main points. We are a group of old people who have lived for several eras, dozens of eras or dozens of eras. There's no need to be emotional here. Hui waved his hand and interrupted the brewing atmosphere, leaving the 3 people present speechless. The blue-clothed young man's face trembled slightly, and he smiled bitterly. "You're still the same as before. Then please allow me to use the simplest words to describe it." The blue-clothed young man coughed softly and looked up at the starry sky. His thoughts were churning and slightly complicated. At the beginning of the story, he was in the 3 elements realm. He was an ordinary person in this world who lived to the age of 20. He experienced a transformation of his thoughts and emotions. He was ordinary. Stop. Please shorten the ordinary part. Hui hurriedly raised his hand to interrupt the young man's lyrical narration. The blue-clothed young man smiled bitterly and said, "This is the 6th century. The young man in blue smiled bitterly. "I heard you say that it's the 56th era now, right? 10 eras ago, in the 46th era, I crossed over from this planet of life to the 8 elements realm for some unknown reason. It's another gathering place of life that is adjacent to the God realm. Over a long period of time, I started as an ordinary person and worked hard bit by bit until I became a heavenly god. You seem to have more or less figured out what happened after that. In the 47th era, that continent was attacked and destroyed by this unknown energy. I was suppressed by that energy in the continent that was about to be destroyed, and I passed through the barrier of the primordial realm and returned to the 3rd element's realm. So, this secret realm was actually left behind by you. However, you left it in the past, in this special place in the 47th era." Hui rubbed his cheeks. After 9 eras, he returned to the place where it ended. It seemed like nothing had changed. Yes, and I also left something in my soul to hint to myself and guide myself to come back here one day to clean up the things that I didn't have time to deal with. The blue-clothed young man scratched his head. This is what I told you before. The hint just now also told me to come here last, so I simply followed you. I see. Hui suddenly understood. He pointed at the land beneath his feet and changed the topic. Is this place the main body of the continent, or just a fragment? The blue-clothed young man shook his head. I don't know. When I rushed into the void with it and came to the three elements realm, it experienced a violent explosion. I saw that some of the fragments of the explosion were annihilated in the void of the three elements realm. I don't know the specifics. Perhaps they have all been annihilated. As for this area that is preserved now, this is a region near the center of the continent, not the central area. I was only able to see all of this because I was lucky. The young man in blue pointed at the solid disk on the ground. When the dark power swept the continent away, this was the only area where the core was still operating. I survived by relying on the protection of the power near the core for now. Later, you were eroded by the power of chaos and didn't survive. We looked at him. The power of chaos. Ah, yes. This power penetrated the barrier and eroded me. Because I was worried that the remaining power of chaos in this remaining fragment would spread, I found a way to hide it in a space. I don't know why, but I saw the world I had lived in for 20 years appear in front of me. It was almost the same as an era ago, but I couldn't find any trace of familiarity. At that time, I knew that this was a special world. Even so, I didn't have enough time to explore it. The blue-clothed young man scratched his head and sighed. After I dealt with this fragment, before I was completely devoured by the power of chaos, I jumped into the void and disintegrated by myself. What happened next is the story of this life. I opened my eyes and returned to this world. After living for about 20 years, I forgot everything that happened in the 8 elements realm. Until now, when I saw this core, I suddenly remembered everything I had experienced. The blue-clothed young man took a deep breath and sighed with emotion. 9 years have passed. It's like a dream. Whether it's the life I lived here, or the era I spent in the 8 elements realm, it's all like a dream. That's all there is to it. The blue-clothed young man shrugged his shoulders at Hui and the others. Sometimes the so-called truth of some things was actually quite simple. It was so simple that it could be divided into 5 steps in detail. Hui, who had been guessing for a long time, was a little stunned after hearing the whole story. The ending was different from what he had imagined. He thought it would be a magnificent and epic story, but he didn't expect it to be, well, it was just a story of a wanderer who had mysteriously slipped away from the 3 elements realm to the 8 elements realm and was left in the 8 elements realm for an entire era. A lot of things must have happened in this era, but this was the blue-clothed young man's story. Now, well, there is no need to listen to this story. When you came back here, did you feel anything strange? We looked at the blue-clothed young man. I'm talking about this life star. In these 20 years, including the previous 20 years, it's close to half a century of life. Actually, I didn't figure out anything. Oh, that's normal. After all, although it said that I've been here or there for 40 years, my understanding is quite vague. Hui nodded to express his understanding. If his soul lost its memory and returned to the God realm, everything would start from scratch. Perhaps he really wouldn't be able to figure out anything in these 40 years. No, it's not that. Well, you can't completely count it like that. The blue-clothed young man put his hands on his waist. How should I put it? I have 40 years of memory, and now that my understanding has returned, it's very fast to go through these 40 years of memory. I just finished looking through them, and I didn't find anything particularly noteworthy. I don't know if it's because the range of activity in these 40 years is too small, or because I didn't deliberately pursue it. So many things are not particularly clear. Well, it seems that we have to wait and see. Speaking of which, why are you here? The blue-clothed young man scratched his head. People from the 8 elements realm rarely come to the 3 elements realm. Most of them go to the 7 elements realm or the 6 elements realm. Well, about that, We have to talk about a certain... Phone, are you done over there? We turned his gaze to Maple, who was still standing on the spot like a pillar. The energy of annihilation and the energy of origin danced on his body, flickering like a lamp with insufficient voltage. Did you really eat something bad? This annihilation energy isn't the main body. Yin Nuoxing glared at him fiercely. If it wasn't for the fact that he still had to adjust the relationship between the annihilation energy and origin energy, he would have given him a kick with his shoe. Well, it's actually like this. Hui shook his head and ignored a certain someone's resentment. He turned to the blue-clothed young man and asked why they were here. Vacation. It wasn't long, but it was said too quickly. The blue-clothed young man accurately grasped the word and smiled bitterly. That's a little annoying. I'm in the middle of my vacation, and I'm forced to work overtime or something. How difficult. Then the two of them squatted at the side with their arms around each other's shoulders and sighed as if they were resonating with each other. The little girl couldn't help but sigh as she looked at Yin Nuoxing. It's not easy for you either. Yin Nuoxing's face twitched a few times. By the time the two lunatics were done resonating with each other, Yin Nuoxing had also successfully held down the split energy of annihilation. As expected, his energy family had another powerful member. He already had enough powerful members in his family, and he was afraid that they would one day find each other an eyesore and purge each other. Looking at the current balance, the two energies of annihilation would be crushed to death in the cradle by the origin energy in a matter of minutes. We asked, "What's your plan for the future?" The young man in blue thought for a while, and then smiled helplessly. After all, I didn't prepare anything before I died. Even though my divine soul has been awakened, I haven't recovered a bit of my former self. For the time being, I don't need to think about the 8 elements realm. As he spoke, he suddenly put his hands on his waist and said proudly, "What's more, there are people I care about in this world now. I plan to stay here for the time being." Oh, after all, you've been reborn. It's normal to have a place to belong. As for the 8 elements realm, well, we suggest that you don't go back if you have nothing to do, at least for the next few eras. And what happened there? The blue-clothed young man was startled. Well, something happened. Anyway, if you want to live a stable life, forget about the 8 elements realm for the time being. As for that place, forget it. Let's not talk about it. I came down here for vacation. Talking about that place gives me a headache. He held his head exaggeratedly and smiled bitterly. At least for now, we want to rest quietly for a while. Not to say a year or a half, at least for a few days or half a month. Yin Nuoxing said, "Admit it, you're here to escape." Hui grimaced and waved his hand gloomily and helplessly. Originally, I was. Forget it. It's not easy to squeeze out time for a vacation, but we still have to run into some trouble. Is it reminding us that there's a dead thing above our heads? As soon as the words left his mouth, Hui regretted it. He looked at Feng with a pained expression. Because of Huey's words, Feng revealed a thoughtful expression. After a while, he raised his head and looked at Hui, expressionlessly saying the words that made it difficult for Hui to refute. "Hui, I want to go back." Hui covered his face. This was really a case of reaping what he sowed. Originally, he had brought them out for a vacation. It was fine that they encountered such a thing, but he still had to mention it. How could he fool Maple? Really, Maple, couldn't he just walk a few more laps? They had only been out for a few days. The doomed creatures of the 8 elements realm wouldn't set off a monstrous wave just because it happened to be these few days, right? That couldn't be right. Well, it was actually possible. Well, when the trouble in this world is over, let's go back, okay? Hui only felt an invisible pressure when Feng stared at him with his bright eyes. He could not help but smile bitterly. Yin Nuoxing nodded. He did not urge or mention a specific time, as though he was just casually mentioning it. However, Hui clearly knew that this guy had actually been concerned about the matters of the Void frontline all this while. Boom, boom. A roar came from the distance of the floating island. It should have been a movement that had happened for a long time. They all raised their heads and looked into the distance. The energy of the core has been exhausted because of the disappearance of the power of chaos. Most of the structure has been destroyed. No, it's too late to replenish the energy now. The young man in blue reacted and threw himself on the stone disk. His eyes kept sweeping around. After a while, his expression changed, and he hurriedly said, "Let's go quickly. Uncle Lou and the others are still waiting over there. The core energy has been exhausted. This area will completely disintegrate in an hour. I'm afraid that even the starry sky I left behind at that time will not last long. Can't we replenish the energy? Feng is here. He has that energy." We could not help but ask as they ran out. The young man in blue shook his head. Back then, our continent divided the area to fight against the power from beyond the sky. Once it is confirmed that it is occupied by the power of chaos and the energy is exhausted, it will enter a state of self-destruction. It is to let the area eroded by the power of chaos self-disintegrate. This process is very difficult to reverse. We did not believe it. He turned his head and looked at Feng. The latter nodded at him. The structure has completely collapsed. There is no saving it. We also did not record the original structure of the structure. It is almost impossible to repair. We smiled bitterly. In the end, it was still the old saying, if others were risking their lives to seek death, could they stop them? He was used to this method of resisting the power of chaos. According to Jing Yun and the others, during the mythological era, there were similar measures to deal with the power of chaos. It was just that they were more experienced and ruthless in dealing with it. For example, they would use the power of order to transform the light of a world that had been completely occupied into a huge energy ball and throw it into the void of chaos, or set off fireworks or something like that. It was reasonable and orderly to discuss the other side before destroying it. Wait a minute. After running for a few steps, the blue-clothed young man quickly stopped. Under the confused gaze of Yin Nuoxing and the other two, he quickly ran back to the side of the stone disk. After fiddling with it for a few seconds, he took the lead and rushed forward. "I've rebuilt the bridge." Although there is no way to stop it from disintegrating, it is still possible to use the energy to open a path. By the time Yin Nuoxing and the others returned to Lu Weiran and the others, the shaking of the earth had made them very uneasy. The young man in blue did not say a word and rushed back to the way they came. Along the way, the sound of the falling earth was getting stronger and stronger. It felt like they were climbing and going downhill in a mountainous area. Along the way, they did not know how many mountains had fallen in front of them. When everyone hurried across the long bridge of stars and returned to the platform on the other side, an extremely violent roar, an explosion suddenly came from the entire starry sky. It was as if hundreds of millions of supernovas had bloomed at the same time. Their vision was dyed into a dazzling white. When they came back to their senses, they could no longer see the shadow of the giant floating island. Today is the most exciting day of my life in the past few decades. Lu Weiran looked at the empty starry sky and let out a soul-deep sigh. Everyone nodded vigorously. The young man in blue listened to everyone's voices and secretly stuck out his tongue. After all, this was a large group of ordinary people. Except for the three people and him who had just awakened his soul, the others were already very tired. After fighting with the soldiers of chaos and running for their lives before the floating island sank, they had run hundreds of marathons at the speed of light. At this moment, 1/3 of the people were lying on the ground with their tongues stuck out. After all, this place was created by him. Seeing how everyone was tormented like this, it was really hard on everyone. The surrounding starry sky was trembling slightly, and there were signs of distortion in the distance. Obviously, this place was about to end. The young man in blue looked at everyone and then continued to smile bitterly. Even if the starry sky was about to collapse, Lord Guardian, can you directly strip the space away? Everyone can't run anymore. The young man in blue moved to Huey's side and whispered. Without thinking, we kicked the ball to Feng. At this moment, that guy was still carrying the little girl from the Zhou family, who was so tired that her eyes were rolling back. Feng, before he could finish speaking, Yin Nuoxing glanced at him. She lowered her right hand and snapped her fingers. A few seconds later, the starry sky suddenly became distorted. The scene in front of them turned into an abstract oil painting. It also looked as if there were tens of millions of vortexes twisting into a fried dough twist in the starry sky. Everyone was shocked. When the distortion reached the upper limit of what the space could withstand, the entire starry sky cracked like a mirror and shattered with a crash. Everyone quickly stood up, wondering what had happened. Then, they saw the underground hall that they had set off from before appearing in their line of sight. Around them were the cultivators of the Alliance who were guarding the door with dumbfounded expressions. Plop! The sound of a large number of bodies falling to the ground shocked everyone again. As soon as they turned around, they saw more than 90 people lying on the ground with their eyes rolling back. Hui was shocked. He didn't know if it was because they had exhausted all their physical strength and saw that they had finally returned to a familiar place, or because they were killed by Feng during the spatial switch just now. They all fainted when they relaxed. Lu Weiran shrugged at the blue-clothed youth. I feel a little baffled. In short, it was better to arrange for people to take care of these people who had experienced a lot of seemingly magical things, but also seemed like nothing had happened. The blue-clothed youth looked at the people from the Lu family who were rolling their eyes. Among the more than 90 people who had fainted, it seemed that only Lu Wuxing was foaming at the mouth and unconscious. He really had fainted, so he carefully glanced in the direction of Yin Nuoxing. Forget it. He didn't want to delve into this matter. Speaking of which, the people from the Lu family were trying their best to hide behind Yin Nuoxing. He didn't know if they were frightened by this god. After dealing with everyone's matters, Lu Weiran finally had time to breathe a sigh of relief. She said to the blue-clothed youth, I've already forgotten why we went to that place in the first place. This. The blue-clothed youth laughed dryly and scratched his cheek with a bitter expression. He couldn't tell Uncle Lu about those things. Otherwise, he would be in big trouble. Well, I really want to reset the time in these few days. Just pretend that I never came here, and then never come back again. Lu Weiran smiled helplessly and shook her head. As they came out of the secret territory, the portal began to become unstable. It trembled and shook a few times, then slowly shrank and dissipated. The portal that had been entrenched here for a while was completely closed, and the things that happened inside were forever sealed in the void, and no one would mention it again. The next day, when she woke up in the morning, she saw herself lying on the bed. Zhou Zibai only felt a little confused. What happened yesterday? Did something happen yesterday? Or was it just a dream? She really couldn't tell apart. However, being able to open her eyes every morning was already a blessing at night. In her memory, there were many people who disappeared silently in the night. This was one of the things she was more afraid of. She always felt that if she closed her eyes at night, she would never be able to open them again. You're awake. The sound of the door being pushed open was accompanied by a soft voice. Zhou Zibai quickly woke up and subconsciously clutched the quilt. She found that she was still wearing the same clothes. She was well dressed and didn't show any signs of spring. She relaxed and raised her head to look in the direction of the door. Yin Nuoxing was slowly walking in. Mr. Feng. Zhou Zibai was about to get out of bed, but Yin Nuoxing quickly held her down and shook his head. Just call me Feng Ling. Didn't you change your name in the secret territory? I'm not used to it yet. Zhou Zibai smiled bitterly. It was mainly because she saw the kind of scene and the destructive power he had. She couldn't bring herself to say this slightly intimate name. Yin Nuoxing walked in and examined Zhou Zibai with his eyes. Then, he leaned forward and suddenly reached out his hand. Zhou Zibai was scared and shrank back slightly. When she saw that his hand had already touched her hair, her pretty face instantly turned red. Zhou Zibai closed her eyes and didn't dare to look at him. She only subconsciously clutched the quilt tightly. Yin Nuoxing nodded and put down his hand after a moment. You're also fine. That's good. Huh. You're the last to wake up. Yin Nuoxing crossed his arms and leaned against the wall. He said faintly, when you came out, you scared Elder Meng and Elder Zheng. Hui and I were responsible for checking all the people who came out of the secret territory so that you wouldn't have any sequelae. After all, They had come into contact with the power of chaos. They had to be careful to avoid any accidents. Now that they confirmed that everyone was fine, it was really over. What? Zhou Zhibai's cheeks were red. She lowered her head and muttered. What? No, no. Zhou Zhibai shook her head repeatedly. She pressed her hands on the bed and rubbed them a few times uneasily. After a long time, she mustered up the courage to speak in a voice that only she could hear. Thank you. Yin Nuoxing waved his hand and walked towards the door. Tidy up and come out first. There's some things to discuss in the secret territory. Everyone else went back first. You're the only one left. Chapter 1773. It was a postscript about the mystery realm. Actually, it was nothing much. It was just a brief mention of this unusual mystery realm. Anyone who walked around in it, as long as they had brains and their brains were not stuffed with weeds or cow dung, could feel that the situation inside was far from normal. Based on their own knowledge and worldview, it was not like they had never been to the cave abodes and secret realms of mortal immortals or heavenly realm experts. The model of the mystery realm that had just ended, well, it was obviously completely different from the two mentioned above. It was like walking around in a dream. Although they came out alive and safe, they still felt like they were in the depths of a dream and were in a daze. As for the matter to be mentioned, it was nothing more than poking Lu Zifeng's mouth or something. The mystery realm was secondary. The most important thing was the mysterious identities of the three people. After all, the incident of the two people smashing the ground with their fists that day was obvious to all. It was better to keep the information under wraps, lest it cause strange chaos in the country. That's about it. Although it might be a little redundant, it's just a reminder. Lu Weiran nodded and said to Zhou Zhibai. She clapped her hands and announced the end of the explanation. There's nothing else. Go back and have a good rest. Pretend that this never happened. The young man in blue shrugged and said, After all, there's nothing. This time it's like going out for a vacation and inexplicably encountering a landslide, an avalanche, a volcanic tornado, and hailstorm, and then being hit by a meteorite and rolling all the way from the top of the mountain to the river at the foot of the mountain. Unfortunately, there was a flood and being washed into the sea. In the end, I was fished onto a boat. After 2 days of recuperation, I returned to normal without leaving any side effects. Everyone, are you playing games with a natural disaster here? Hey, that's what it means. I didn't get anything from this trip to the mystery realm, right? I only got a bunch of messy experiences and memories, and they're the kind of memories that won't be pulled out if nothing happens. The blue-clothed youth grinned at Lu Weiran. Don't worry, Uncle Lu. It's fine. If there's anything, I'll help you make another trip. Lu Weiran rolled her eyes. That was the gist of it. They had made a trip to the secret realm, but the information they had was completely wrong. Or rather, there was no information at all. If it weren't for the appearance of the secret realm itself and the small mechanisms installed in the passage, he wouldn't have thought of it as a secret realm of heavenly state or mortal immortals. This was simply a pit. They had spent so much effort to go one round in it, and not only did they end up as bystanders, but they were also met with a face full of dust. In the end, they had to force themselves to pretend that nothing had happened, just like a dream. If you want to say it, well, although it's a bit abrupt, what do you plan to do next? On the beach of the island, the young man in blue put his hands in his pockets and looked at the sparkling sea. He tilted his head slightly and asked Hui, who was in a daze. Well, actually, there's nothing to do. Hui subconsciously said this sentence, and his whole body trembled. He hurriedly turned his gaze to the side. When he saw that Feng wasn't beside him, he sighed in relief and continued. Originally, we came here to rest for a while and give ourselves a vacation. Well, now because of this annoying thing that we deliberately put aside for the time being, Feng even said, I want to go back, or something. Hui scratched his head. Then let's go back after 2 more days. Although there's nothing to do here, I just want to relax for 2 days. Dragging out the vacation time and not wanting to go to work. Ah, I know that very well. The blue-clothed youth spread his hands. The two looked at each other and sighed. 2 days, huh? Let's go around this world and see if there's anything particularly interesting. I'm quite interested in that world core. We shook his hand to get rid of the gloomy atmosphere. A world core that manifests in the prime realm and runs around everywhere is rare even in the eightfold realm. Speaking of the world core, the blue-clothed youth rubbed his chin and pondered. He slowly said, "Some time ago, we encountered something special. The beginning of that thing hasn't been found yet, and it ended in a muddled and strange way. When we tried to find a way to explore it, it seemed like everything was stopping us. Things that shouldn't be wrong in theory, things that shouldn't happen in theory, and some strange natural phenomena. We became spirited when talking about strange things. Now that you mention it, I'm excited. Can you tell me more about it?" "There's quite a lot. I'll just pick a few simple ones. Do you still remember the bunch of natural phenomena I just mentioned? The one where you played hide-and-seek with nature?" The blue-clothed youth spat out a mouthful of saliva and scratched his head with a wry smile. "Hide-and-seek? Ahem. Actually, that's not an exaggeration. That's a situation I encountered in the middle of investigating the matter I just told you about. In just half an hour, I experienced everything I said." Hui listened with his mouth agape. Good heavens, there's actually someone who can treat a natural disaster documentary as a diary? Is this guy cursed by the rules? Or is he, in fact, the chosen one? The one responsible for bad luck? In addition to what I said, there were other things that happened at the same time. For example, an unpredictable solar storm, and a satellite that had long passed the solar storm's impact time, but failed for no reason. Abnormal crustal movements, sudden earthquakes, flash floods, tsunamis, thunderstorms, and even a thunderbolt that blew up a pile of ruins in my basement. Also, because I went to a place to investigate, it caused a mountain fire that was extinguished for half a year and still couldn't be put out, and so on. Seeing Huey's expression become more and more strange and pitiful as he recounted, the blue-clothed youth hurriedly waved his hand. No, it's not just me who caused it. Uncle Lou and the others also had the same situation. It's us who encountered these things together. We just thought it was an unlucky year and bad feng shui. Well, it's true that cultivators aren't very careful when they say these things. These things put together are too coincidental and too deliberate. But at that time, we just couldn't explain it because they were all natural disasters and eliminated the possibility of man-made causes. We believed that this was something that couldn't be traced and announced early on that we gave up. Now that I think about it, maybe we were targeted by the heavens. Cough, cough. Maybe we were targeted by the world core of this world. It sounds like the world core itself wants to cover up or block something and use the power of the rules to affect you guys. We listened and nodded. So what's the situation? The blue-clothed youth rubbed his chin and pondered for a while, thinking for a while about how to put it in the simplest and most convenient way. That started a year ago. Omitting the matter of the local life that you guys don't pay attention to, it should be that the people in the world are secretly looking for something. Should be. We listened to this ambiguous statement and frowned. It can't be that they're looking for the world core, right? It's fine if that thing manifests in the real world, but it also appears in front of many lives? No, it shouldn't be, right? The blue-clothed youth covered his eyes and laughed bitterly. It shouldn't be. Normal people shouldn't be able to directly face the world core. To be more specific, a year ago, a group of powerful people secretly infiltrated our huaxia. I'll omit a few million words in the middle, but in the end, we caught them and got what I just said from them. That thing has been around the world for more than 10 years, and they followed the traces to our huaxia. So, we followed the clues they gave us, and the situation after that is as you know. They only said that it's a thing, something ancient, something powerful, something... The blue-clothed youth pursed his lips. That's about it. Are you interested in taking a look? We thought for a while, and he shook his head. To be honest, I'm not interested this time. I see. Hearing this, the blue-clothed youth scratched his head regretfully. All right, then let's put this matter aside for now, but you can probably touch it when you're bored. The blue-clothed youth smiled bitterly. All right, I'll tell you about it. If you suddenly have the energy to go look for it, I'll ask Uncle Lou to make things convenient for you. Oh, it doesn't seem to be necessary. Although it should be something fun, he was not interested in it. He was scared of that damned secret realm. This damned world was really afraid that he would suddenly encounter something related to the Order of Chaos. If that happened, Maple would urge him to go back. At that point, he really couldn't force Maple to stay here and rest. Therefore, though he found it amusing, he could only go against his conscience, so none of it, and say that he was not interested or something like that. Well, it was still possible for them to secretly check it out. From the perspective of the Void, this planet with life actually held no secrets to them. It was just a matter of whether they wanted to unravel it or not. As for what it was, they would just have to take a look. According to the blue-clothed youth, those people should be looking for that thing that might be able to obtain great power. As soon as he heard this, he knew that the mysterious thing was most likely an energy source. It contained a huge amount of energy and could move on its own. That was why it could fool the locals. So far, no one had even seen its true appearance. These people were quite patient. They had been chasing an invisible thing for more than 10 years. Thinking of this, he suddenly turned his head to look at the little girl. He couldn't help but cover his face. She was also very powerful. She had been chasing the invisible core of the 8 Elements realm for several years. The whole Yuan realm had been circled by her many times. However, he had to put this matter aside for the time being. He could do it alone in the dark. For the next 2 days, it was impossible to stay in the villa. After coming to the new world, it was impossible to stay in one place and do nothing. When Zhou Zibai regained some of her vitality, he would continue to bring people out to cause trouble. It would be best if he could cause so much trouble that Maple did not have time to think about the Void frontline. As for where to cause trouble, this kind of thing was fine, even if it was just going out for a stroll. Although I know what you are thinking, Zhou Zibai couldn't help muttering. She looked at Yin Nuoxing, who was walking in front of the little girl, and sighed. But we came back from the island less than a day ago. Can't you let me rest for a while? Hey, little girl, life is about tormenting yourself. You will get rusty if you rest for so long. We grinned hard. Zhou Zibai rolled her eyes. Although she knew that the 3 people in front of her were not as simple as they looked, and they might not be as young as they looked. But when she saw a young man who seemed to be a little younger than her calling her little girl, she felt strange in her heart. Jiang City was not particularly prosperous. It was barely near the seaside, and it was not very close to the seaside. There were basically no major natural disasters, so it was relatively safe. They were near the suburbs, far away from the city center. There were not many places to visit. Tall scaffolding could be seen everywhere. It was a building waiting to be built, or a wasteland waiting to be treated. Looking a little further away, they could almost see the uplifted hills. There were also muddy footprints left by vehicles on the nearby roads. They were originally far away from the downtown area. After taking 2 steps out, they unknowingly became more remote. It was a good afternoon, and the whole long street was quiet. The scene suddenly changed in front of them. The ground was full of mud and sand, and there was a little gloomy atmosphere, which made Hui and the others startled. Does this place have a story? A straight road opened up behind him, extending for 2 to 3 miles. It was a residential area full of vitality, no longer as barren as this place. However, this place, which was only a short distance away, seemed to be surrounded by an inexplicably unpleasant aura. It didn't look much different from the surrounding reddish-brown soil, but it was completely barren in front of him. There wasn't even a blade of grass, and it was lifeless. There was a gloomy and cold aura lingering on this completely dead land, as if something was entrenched here. This place, Zhou Zibai slightly frowned in thought, but she couldn't give an answer. I've only heard of this place. The older generation said that this place is a mass grave, and it's inauspicious. Some people said that it has nothing to do with this. They talk about feng shui, but no one said anything specific. It doesn't look like a mass grave. Hui shook his head. There is no residual soul aura, not even a little fragment. There should not have been a large-scale burial of the dead here in the past 100 years. It is a bit like entrenched something that is the opposite of order, but not like the order of chaos. Hearing the words order and chaos again, Zhou Zibai finally could not help but ask curiously, I have always heard you guys talk about order and chaos. Do they refer to something specific? Oh, you guys have a saying in recent years to describe things that exist in the world, called it matter and another kind of antimatter that is the opposite of its nature, right? We said. Zhou Zibai nodded. You could just treat it as that kind of situation. Although the truth is trillions of times more complicated than this part. For you just need to understand it simply. There's no need to go deeper. Zhou Zibai rolled her eyes and tried to understand. So, there's an anti-chaos aura remit here? Well, I feel like it, but it is not purely the kind that we are familiar with. Feng, take a look at the situation. This remnant trace is a little too big. Yin Nuoxing came back to her senses and moved the lines on her face as a response. She turned around and jumped into the land, walked back and forth twice, then jumped to the side of the road and said, negative aura, 30% similar to the aura of chaos. Although I'm still not sure. Zhou Zibai tried to understand, tried, and gave up. But if this thing is left here, it should be very dangerous, right? It is harmless. Yin Nuoxing shook her head, then suddenly paused and nodded. For you guys, if it is a threat that is enough to affect the mind and destroy the soul, if it is left here, it will quietly spread. Then it is better to get rid of it. This place is quite close to where people live. He nodded in understanding and stretched for a while. Just when he was about to make a move, he suddenly heard hurried footsteps. A person was quickly approaching them. Hey, it is very dangerous here. All of you, back off. Although they did not know what was going on, when something was rapidly approaching them, the action of retreating was instinctive. So Hui, the little girl, and Zhou Zibai hurriedly took 2 steps back. Yin Nuoxing was still in a daze and did not react. She slowly turned her head and saw a shadow rushing in front of her. Like the wind, the shadow dragged her around and threw her to Hui. She was stunned. The shadow that suddenly appeared took something out of nowhere and waved it at the brownish-red ground in front of her. There was a slight sound of energy, and then a glowing dust was sprinkled on the ground in front of her by the person in front of her. It was estimated that it was not even 2 grams, but after only 5 seconds, a slightly huge energy storm rolled up on the ground. The dust and the storm were probably invisible to ordinary people. It could be seen from Zhou Zibai's dazed look at the person rather than the storm. The storm only swirled in place for a while before it dissipated on its own. The unknown, gloomy aura lingering in this place also did not dissipate. The reason was unclear. He looked as if it had been purified. There was no longer any trace of gloomy aura left in this place. The wind that blew in his face made him feel refreshed. Perhaps a few blades of grass could grow back in this destroyed place. TSK. The energy aura has become stronger again. It seems that I have to hurry up. The figure that suddenly appeared in front of her smacked her lips and muttered to herself. When she was done, she gently breathed a sigh of relief. When she turned around and was about to leave, she saw the 4 people staring at her. Her pretty face suddenly stiffened. Yin Nuoxing calmed himself down and looked at the person who threw him away. It was a girl wearing a white cloak with red patterns engraved on it. She was petite and had an exquisite figure, but he could still see some obvious curves. She had a head of light blonde hair, and her appearance could be said to be 1 in a million beautiful, and, he cannot say whether it should be called cute or beautiful. In some ways, there was nothing wrong with her delicate face. At this moment, her slightly stiff and flustered appearance made her look a little pitiful. Her light silver eyes could not help but twitch a little. Before Yin Nuoxing and the others could express anything with their expressionless faces, the girl suddenly put her palms together and bowed to them. Her tone was indifferent as she said, I'm very sorry for scaring you. I just saw that there was something unclean here, so I quickly came to deal with it. If I scared you, please forgive me. After that, she raised her head and stuck out her tongue at them cutely. Hey, Zhou Zhibai's cheeks twitched slightly. Taoist? Exorcism? Yes, 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 that's what I mean. The girl in the white cloak instantly understood something and nodded vigorously. Then she laughed dryly and stepped back. There is nothing strange here. I have to find the next strange place to maintain world peace. I'll take my leave first. There was another burst of hurried footsteps, rushing over like a gust of wind and rushing away in a hurry. At the same time, it also purified the place in front of them. Zhou Zhibai was a little stunned. Have the Taoist style changed these years? Hui blinked his eyes. Can't you see it? Oh, that's right. You're just a little girl. You can't see it. Zhou Zhibai puffed her cheeks. Please don't. Forget it, Mr. Hui. What did you just say? What's so special about that girl? What's so special about him? Hui thought for a moment, and suddenly an expression of having a good idea appeared on his face. He turned his head and looked at Zhou Zhibai. He lowered his head and said in a gloomy tone, That girl is not human. Well, that is to say, she's some kind of monster, Zhou Zhibai said calmly. We saw that the little girl wasn't scared at all, so he scratched his head in boredom and skipped this part. Spiritual monster. Not really, but I didn't pry into it right away, so for the time being, Feng, did you see it? Yin Nuoxing raised her head and slowly responded, Weak aura of order, camouflaged low entanglement of rules, correction. For the tertiary realm, strong aura of order, high entanglement of rules, and obvious traces of energy. I speculate that there is a 50% probability that it's an energy life form. The traces of energy transformation are within the normal range. Oh ho! Hui and the little girl made a sound of obvious interest at the same time. Zhou Zhibai looked at them with a blank face, not knowing what was going on. Shall we follow them and take a look? Hui's mouth curved into a rather interested arc. Yin Nuoxing did not respond. She reached out and held Zhou Zhibai's waist. There was no need to respond to such a simple question. Hui had already pulled her and flew into the sky as soon as she finished speaking. As Zhou Zhibai got used to their identities, Hui became more and more unscrupulous. For example, when they flew into the sky this time, the little girl was so scared that she screamed desperately in his arms. It did not take much effort to find the girl in the cloak. When they found her, she had already arrived at the other end of Jiang City, which was also a suburb. She used the skill that she just showed in front of them to deal with the remaining dark aura on the ground. Well, look again, she's not human. We can't pry into it openly. She can sense it. 1,000 meters high in the sky, we looked carefully for a while and then cut his line of sight. The girl in the cloak was now looking around in confusion on the brownish-red soil. There was no trace of her. There shouldn't be any life form that can reach this level on this planet, right? Yin Nuoxing said, I don't know. It's hard to say. If the tertiary realm has a theoretical life form conversion, it's much easier to transform into an energy life form than the tertiary realm. I'm a little interested. I want to see. Hui turned his gaze and saw that Feng really showed an interested expression. He let out a long sigh of relief in his heart. Well, it's worth it to hear this sentence. Even if I blow up this place, I won't regret it. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.